My son changed the locks on my house, so I bought his mortgage. The spare key was under the red ceramic cardinal, same spot for 20 years. My late wife bought that bird at a church craft fair because it looked cheerful enough to guard a door. On Christmas Eve, I nudged it aside, reached under, and fed the key to the lock. The lock swallowed and did not return it. The knob turned half an inch and stopped hard, the way a throat does when a name is too heavy to say. Snow made everything quiet. A blue ribbon of light from the porch stretched across the steps like a welcome mat no one meant. I stood there with a plastic grocery bag of oranges, Navels on sale 2 for 1, and a store pie sweating inside its tin. Someone across the cul-de-sac dragged a trash can. The lid scraped concrete, and then that sound faded too. I tried the key again because men are stubborn with metal. Nothing. Tumblers changed. My son had changed them. I could have knocked. People knock when they want to be let in. I did not. Pride is a small voice that says, let us keep what is left. I set the oranges down, brushed the snow off the top step with my boot, and walked back to the truck. The door hinges squealed like they remembered younger winters. Inside smelled like old coffee and cut pine from the hardware store where I still take side jobs. I turned the ignition. The heater coughed, then breathed warm over my hands. I rested my forehead on the steering wheel and stared at the house I framed with my own hands. The front window glowed. Shapes moved through it. My son's shoulders, the tree, a shadow that might have been laughter. My key lay in my palm, cold as a coin no store will take. Anger kept its coat on. It sat next to me and said nothing. I have learned that when a thing you love stops opening, you stop pushing and write. I pulled my notebook from the glove box. The cover is soft leather, the color of toast. My wife used to tease that I loved it more than my wallet. I clicked my pen and made a small column of numbers because math tells a kind of truth words duck. Principal, interest, late fees, taxes, insurance. I guessed at the current balance the way you guess at a child's height from the new scuffs on a door frame. I wrote what I knew when they closed. What rate the month they first missed a payment because I loaned them. Just to bridge. The letter I saw on the counter that he covered with junk mail. You do not raise a son planning for him to lock you out. You raise him planning for him to open doors you never reached. Still, life is not obliged to follow your blueprints. I flipped the page and drew the house like I had years ago on graph paper, 4 walls, a roofline, a chimney I insisted on, even when the builder said no one uses wood anymore. Then I drew a small rectangle above it and wrote note. Paper opens what keys cannot. Banks close for Christmas, but they do not stop keeping ledgers. Notes move in boxes you never see, bundled, carved, reassigned. I know this not because I am clever, but because I have spent a lifetime talking to men in boots about rafters and to women at desks about permits. Someone always knows someone. I wrote 3 names: a loan officer who used to buy fence posts from me, a lawyer who likes to fish alone on Sundays, a woman at the servicing company who once called to remind me to sign a lion release for a neighbor and thank me for making her day easy. People remember easy days. I added up monthly payments in my head. I did the math 3 ways. On time, late, forgiven, and every answer landed on the same square. My son was not paying for the roof above his head. He was paying for the rush of saying he was grown. The house was a costume for that sentence. Costumes eventually have to be returned. The heater blew harder. Frost crawled back from the windshield. I could see the front door clearly now. Someone had hung a wreath of artificial pine and real ribbon. My wife would have fluffed the bough. My son's wife, God bless her impatience, liked things new even when the old still worked. New locks, new words for old rules. Family to her meant invitations with end times. I thought of calling the police. I thought of calling my pastor. The first would ask for proof of residence. The second would ask for proof of grace. I had neither in my pocket tonight. What I had was a dead key, a bag of oranges, a notebook, and a trait I understood: when you cannot enter, you change the way you approach the door. Somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd page, the decision arrived. It did not stomp its feet. It did not clear its throat. It simply took the chair across from me. In the morning, I would call the servicing company. I would ask about the status of the loan. Delinquent, in default, transferred. I would ask what it would take for the note to wear my name. It is not magic. It is paperwork. Men like me have built houses with fewer tools. A thought followed the decision like a coat over a shirt. If the paper became mine, the door could remain theirs. No sheriff. No garbage bags at the curb. No cold lesson shouted on a cold night. Warmth has a price, and I have watched boys become men only after they learned to pay it. Maybe the payments would not come to me. Maybe they would go where gratitude grows faster. My wife used to cut oranges into quarters and pass them out at church to the kids whose parents came late. She called it juice for patience. Her mother, my son's grandmother, used to take her social security check and split it in envelopes marked with names that were not her own. Missions Music, a girl from the laundromat who needed textbooks. I can still see her shaky cursive, Rose. She gave away what little she had, as if giving were interest paid on a debt to kindness. I picked up one of the oranges from the seat and rolled it against my palm. The skin was thick-pocked, impossible to mistake for anything but itself. I imagined a fund with her name, a scholarship the size of a monthly mortgage check. Terms simple enough for any judge to understand and any child to explain at dinner. Payment credited when a check cleared to a school account. Penalty forgiven when hours were logged pounding nails on volunteer weekends. Every month a lesson. Every receipt a story. The truck's clock changed to midnight. Somewhere in the house, someone laughed, a string of lights blinked, hesitated, blinked again. I closed the notebook. Outside, the snow had deepened. My footprints on the walk were already softening back to smooth. It is a mercy how quickly the earth forgives what presses it. I put the oranges back in the bag. I turned the key. This key still worked, and the engine gave me that old, dependable rumble. I did not look at the front door again. Doors are proud things. They do not like to be stared at when they have just told you something hard. I backed out slowly, tires whispering over powder, and drove toward the main road. Anger never said a word. Pride sat where it always sits, behind the sternum, light as a folded letter and heavy as a name. People imagine revenge as fire. Mine felt like a pilot light, small, steady enough to keep the pipes from bursting. I was not going to freeze anyone out. I was going to make warmth cost what it should. And when my son finally learned the sum, he would not owe me. He would owe a girl with a backpack and a winter coat 2 sizes too big, who would hear his grandmother's name and believe, for one clean moment, that door's open. The first brick went down under a hand that could not feel much anymore. Callus on callus, a glove made of work. I buttered the edge with mortar and set it against the line for the porch riser. Lime bit the cracked skin along my knuckles. I tapped the corner with the trowel until the bubble in the level sat right between the black marks. When you place the first piece true, the rest learn how to behave. Most people think I built a house. Truth is, the house built me, one board at a time. I still dream in 8-foot studs and 16-inch centers. I can hear a crooked joist without seeing it. The ground that winter was hard as pride. We ran string from batter boards and listened to it sing in the wind. A thin, high note that said, "Pay attention." Rebar went into trenches like ribs. The slab took its breath and set slow. A boy, my boy, pressed a stick into the wet corner and wrote J+D inside a lopsided heart, then looked at me quick to check if a foreman would scold him. I didn't. Some marks belong under everything. We framed in a weekend no one remembers but me. The air smelled like cut pine and hot coffee. I snapped chalk lines along the subfloor and felt the grit on my fingers like a map I could read in the dark. The plumb bob swung and found its point over and over, a small gravity insisting on what is straight. Halverson, the building inspector, signed the rough in on a Tuesday and told me the shear wall was overbuilt. That is a word people use when they don't plan to live somewhere. I smiled and left the additional screws in the plywood. Overbuilt keeps you sleeping. My wife came every afternoon with sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and sentences wrapped in grace. She said the kitchen should face the maple, so she could watch leaves go from green to the color of school buses. She said the dining room needed a window low enough for little eyes to see the street and count mail trucks. She said the pantry was not for food. It was for hiding during hide and seek. I built what she said, and the walls learned our names. The day we hung the front door, my son held the hinge screws in his mouth because his hands were busy. He was small then, long socks pushed down to his ankles, hair stuck up in the back like static. "Heavy," he said when I lifted the slab onto the hinges. "That's how you know it's worth guarding," I told him. We set the strike plate, adjusted the latch, and I handed him the screwdriver. He turned the last screw and looked up as if he had helped God invent privacy. I let him believe it. Some faith should not be corrected. We moved in a week before Thanksgiving. The maple had gone to bus, yellow and then to the color of old pennies. Cardboard boxes lined the hall like a parade of promises. I put the red ceramic cardinal on the porch because my wife said it looked cheerful enough to guard a door. Inside, she placed a bowl on the counter and filled it with oranges. "For guests," she said, which meant for anyone who once needed a reason to stay 5 more minutes. Years carried themselves like lumber, some straight, some warped. My boy grew. He learned the difference between a 10D and a 16D nail by the sound they made in a coffee can. He missed high school curfew twice and came home to me sitting at the kitchen table with a single lamp on, a scene from a movie that stops being a scene when you are the father in it. He slammed one door and then apologized to it. He brought home a girl who looked at the house the way you look at a mirror when the haircut is not finished yet. I told myself time teaches everyone how to fit. I promised him, once when we were sanding the banister smooth as a river rock, that this would always be a family house. "What's that mean?" he asked. He was 14 and smelled of sweat and hope. "Means it won't decide against you," I said. "Means it will be here. Means you'll never have to ask if you belong." He seemed to file the words away the way boys do, quick, careless, secretly. The day I handed him a key, he was 26 and carrying a cardboard box marked K. Teachen in a handwriting that had learned to rush. The realtor had taken a photo of him and his wife on the lawn with a Sueldi sign tilted up like a trophy. There was a ribbon on the mailbox because she liked bows. It hung there like an announcement that didn't know what it was announcing. We had refinished the floors for them the week before. I labeled the breaker panel because no one should lose a refrigerator full of food in a storm. I had kept a key on a brass fob shaped like a little house. It was heavy enough to remind you of itself in your pocket, but small enough to pass to a new hand without ceremony. I pressed it into his palm and said, "Doors are for people who remember why they're opening." He laughed and hugged me with one arm, because the other held his phone. A moving truck hissed at the curb. The dog from across the street barked at nothing. He said, "Thanks, Dad," and I answered with my throat. That key once clicked like a promise. It turned a cylinder and opened a future that, in my mind, always had a place at our table. When you give someone a key, you think you are giving them metal. You are not. You are giving them an invitation to keep choosing you every time they come home. Now, when I put my spare key into the new lock and felt it jam, I thought of that brass fob and the weight it used to have. I thought of my son's boyish grin the day he could finally open the door without knocking. How proud he was to look back from the threshold and say, "Come on in." How I stood there and let him be the one to offer welcome. Pride sometimes switches hands. It doesn't always choose the right moment to let go. The truth that hurt was simple. The same tool that opened the next chapter had been recast to shut the book. Metal hadn't changed. Intention had. A key is just a shape until a heart tells it what to do. I don't say this to make him a villain. Houses teach you that load. Bearing mistakes are common and fixable if you find them before the roof sags. We put too much load on possession, not enough on promise. Deeds record who holds title. They do not record who holds each other. When I walk past the maple now, I still see through the kitchen window the corner where the bowl of oranges sits. I still know the sound the stairs make, third from the bottom. A soft complaint like an old friend. The house keeps all those noises the way a body keeps scars, not as shame as history. My name is in the concrete under the water heater where no one looks. My boy's stick heart is there too. The water heater was replaced last year, and I watched the plumber slide the new tank over the old story. Nothing erased, just covered and working. People will tell you a man owns a house. I have learned it is the other way around. A house owns a man enough to teach him what he owes. Light bulbs, gutters, fences, patience. Especially patience. You can buy a door. You cannot buy the right to be expected at it. So here is the lesson that sits under all the other lessons. Like a good footing under a wall, possession is the cheapest part. You can sign your name on paper and still have nothing if you stop showing up with your hands, your time, your listening. A key is not a covenant. A mortgage is not a promise. Belonging costs what duty demands, and duty is paid in visits, in apologies, in quiet repairs done when no one is filming. The first brick taught me that. Said it true, and the rest might learn to follow. The first hint didn't shout. It hid, slipped between envelopes that wore blush paper and gold foil. My son's kitchen counter was a small snowdrift of wedding things back then: RSVP cards, calligraphed addresses, a brochure for a venue with lanterns strung like tame stars. I'd come by to fix a grinding garbage disposal. While the hex key bit and the motor sputtered back to civil, my eye caught a windowed envelope in the pile. Gray. Governmental. A diagonal orange band across the top: important account notice. It looked like a bruise among roses. I did not open it. I slid a coaster over the stack and asked if the disposal still rattled. The young version of my daughter-in-law said, "Thank you," in a tone that could have been gratitude, or could have been a sign on a gate that read private drive. My son came in late from a hardware run, kissed her temple, and said he had all the payments set to autopilot. He said it as if automation were maturity. I tightened the last screw and left the hex key under the sink for the next time he needed it. A month later, he called me from the driveway, voice already lit by friction. "Dad, did you drop off that Mauer manual? You can't leave stuff in the mailbox. It looks old." I said I'd put it under the mat. And how was the job going? And did he need help with the escrow analysis the lender sent every spring? Silence, the length of a sentence he didn't want to say. "We're fine," he answered. And then, as if someone had pinched him, "We're trying to be financially independent here." Independent was her word. It started appearing on decorations, on conversations, on the wall in a framed print that asked guests to respect our boundaries. The print hung in the entryway where the map of the neighborhood used to lie, the one with highlighted routes to grocery stores and clinics, and the farmer's market where my wife once bought peaches by smell. I would come by with a spare snow shovel, or a can of WD-40, or a tip about the city's bulk pickup day, and be told gently that they had a system. Their system involved a lot of apps, and very little time for the old one where you look at someone and say, "We could use your hands." The first past due notice arrived at my address by mistake. Postal muscle memory from years when the name on every bill was mine. I knew the envelope before I saw the return address. The paper had that thin stiffness that warns you a number is about to do the talking. I set it on the table and stared at my name above his loan number, the way a tree might look at its leaves after they've turned. I drove it over and handed it to him unopened. He frowned at the top left corner, logo of the lender, and peeled it back with a thumbnail. His eyes scanned with that quickness people use when they're hoping the sentence they fear will not be exactly where it always is. "It's just a timing issue," he said, shoulder rising, which is what a man's body does when he tries to guard his pride from a breeze. Her paycheck hit 2 days late. "We've got this." She stepped into the doorway and added, "Interest rates are not what they were in your day, and we don't want to be dependent." The word landed on the floor with a metal clink. I nodded and asked if they'd set up email alerts for taxes and insurance. "We're not children," he said, as if alerts were bedtime. That summer, the HOA sent a letter about weeds along the side yard. It used the phrase, "community standards," which is the HOA's way of saying, "Don't turn the street into a mirror we don't like looking at." He texted me a photo of the letter with a laughing emoji, and then borrowed my string trimmer. He returned it with no line left, and the same laugh. A second notice showed up, then a third. The color changed from polite blue to a stern red, as if an envelope could raise its voice. One evening, dropping a torque wrench he'd forgotten to return, I saw a new kind of mail on the console table, notice of transfer of servicing. The lender's familiar name had been replaced by a company I'd never heard of, the kind of name invented in a conference room by men who wear their shirts too tight. Greenfield, Evergreen, Oakstone, words that sound like backyards even when they live in office parks. "You switching banks?" I asked too lightly, as if you ask about switching from decaf to regular. "It's just administrative," he said, already bored of the topic he hadn't had in his head long enough to be bored of. "Everyone sells everything now." Not everyone, I thought, but did not say. I went home and opened my notebook. I wrote the new company's name and a date from the letter in small, even numbers. Then I called an old friend who used to buy fence posts from me before he sat behind a desk and learned to sell paper that binds people to houses. "Servicer transfer on a young loan?" I asked. "Could be normal," he said, which is the other word for not good but not a fire yet. Could be boarded with a sub-servicer. Could be flagged for special. Special meaning delinquent, I said, the way a carpenter says level when the bubble refuses to move. He didn't confirm. He didn't have to. Good men know how to let silence do the ethics. I left him and called a lawyer who fishes alone on Sundays and sometimes hires me to fix his dock. Hypothetically, I said, a word that lawyers try not to laugh at when civilians use it. If a note's headed to special servicing, what path does it take? Depends who's holding the bag, he said. Could stay with the servicer. Could get pushed to a special servicer that does nothing but non-performing. If the numbers are small enough and the file is messy enough, someone throws it into a pool and sells the pool to make it someone else's problem. Loan level bids happen too, but less often. Why? I told him no why, he hummed, a sound like line whipping off a reel. If a bank wants out, it wants out clean, he said. They don't like headlines or houses. They like spreadsheets. If you ever wanted to hold paper, you'd watch the tapes when they shop them. I am not a banker. I am a man with a pencil and hands that remember weight. But I have learned that houses and money move through the same tunnels. They go where someone pushes, and they stop where someone cares. I began to see the line my son's loan might be riding, from the bright office of a retail lender to a cubicle where notes are scanned and scanned again, until they are just barcodes and balances. From there, a folder on a desktop labeled NPL Tape Q3. From there, the quiet shuffle of a discount. A week later, a coupon book arrived with the new servicer's logo. The monthly line was higher than before: escrow shortage, insurance correction, a late fee waiting like a bad tooth. He tossed the book into a drawer. "Mu pay online," he said. "Paper is for old people." I wanted to tell him paper is also for courts, for policies, for the day when memory turns slippery and you need a thing that won't. The last piece clicked in at my kitchen table, between a cooling mug of coffee and the drip of the faucet I hadn't gotten around to fixing. The bank, his bank, had a habit, my friend said, of scraping off small delinquents at year's end so their reports looked like a field with no weeds. "They'll price it to move if the story's ugly," he said. "Married couple, new job, HOA dings, maybe an escrow shortfall, maybe a missed renewal on the homeowner's policy. That's an ugly story in a neat neighborhood. Ugly to them meant opportunity to me, and not the kind you brag about at bars. The kind you carry with two hands and set down like a fragile box, careful, not because it might break, but because it might teach." If the paper went to market, there was a rote, a clean, legal one, for a man like me to step in, sign where names grow, and hold the instrument that opens doors while leaving the door itself alone. I looked at the little brass house on my keychain, the one that used to mean "come in," and thought how a symbol can age and still do work. He had a wife now and talk of independence, and a voice that tensed when bills arrived. I had a notebook and a few friends who remembered I once made their days easy. I wrote 3 names on the next page, and next to each I wrote the time their office opened. Then, without ceremony, I circled the servicer's number and underlined it twice. The bank lot on December 26th looked like a chalkboard someone had dragged a mitten across. Gray, smeared, the lines of tires still pressed into last night's dusting. Salt crackled under my boots. A single red poinsettia leaned in the front window, doing its best against fluorescent light. The branch opened 5 minutes early because mornings after holidays belonged to people who balance ledgers. I had written the names the night before. I chose the one who had once remembered to call me about a lion release for a neighbor, and thanked me for making her day easy. Miss Perez wore a sweater the color of wet slate and an expression I trust in banker's patient, not impressed by panic. I set my notebook on her desk, and after we exchanged those polite sentences you exchange when you both know why you're really there, I said, "I'm here about a loan that has my blood in the drywall." She didn't smile, but her eyes adjusted. "Name." I gave my son's, and because the world runs on identifiers more than kin, the last 4 of the loan. Her keyboard made that soft clack that sounds like measured rainfall. The screen's light turned her glasses into little winter ponds. "Status?" I asked. "Transferred to servicing with Greenfield," she said. 91 days past due on principal and interest. Escrow shortage after insurance adjustment. Taxes are current through the last half because they impounded. Hazard policy lapsed, force place coverage added. She looked up. "You're not on the note." "I was long ago on the house," I said. Sometimes I still am when the pipes don't want to behave. She nodded the way professionals nod when they have learned not to judge the part of the story that isn't on their screen. I didn't ask her to break a rule. I asked her to teach me the rules that apply when a note stops behaving. "Late fees," I said. "Accumulating. Modest. The bigger issue is the escrow analysis. When the hazard was force placed, the monthly jumped. Borrowers in that tier usually don't read the letters until the number changes." She tapped a line. "We sent a notice of intent to accelerate. The file boarded with the sub-servicer 3 weeks ago." "Which means?" I asked, though I knew, because hearing it out loud makes it solid enough to plan around. "Which means loss mitigation will attempt contact. If no response, they'll move to either a repayment plan or referral to the special servicer, given the balance and the risk grade." Her finger traveled down the screen like a quiet metronome. "I would not be surprised if it ends up in a non-performing pool." "A quarter end scrub," I said. "Yeah, and really," she said. "But yes." The corner of her mouth twitched like clean snow. There are 2 kinds of conversations in banks. The ones where someone wants to be rescued from a number, and the ones where someone wants to take custody of it. I set my pencil on the notebook and said the second kind thing. "If that paper goes to market," I said, "how does a small buyer raise his hand without tripping over the velvet ropes?" She leaned back. The chair sighed. "We don't do retail on that," she said. "There's a desk that aggregates loans into tapes. Buyers sign NDAs, receive anonymized data, submit indicative bids, then best and final. Sometimes we entertain single asset offers if the file is particular. Particular as in ugly. Particular as in we would like the story to resolve without press releases, she said, which is how good bankers talk about mercy without using the word. I'm not in the business of headlines, I said. I'm in the business of houses standing and people staying in them. She didn't write that down. She wrote instead an email address and a first name. Portfolio dispositions, she said. Asked for a non-broker NDA. We will require proof of funds and a legal entity. If you get a tape, you'll also get a broker price opinion and loss severity assumptions. The bid has to make sense against those. An LLC okay, I asked. LLC trust, fund, whatever holds the paper and keeps our compliance folks from needing aspirin, she said. If you win, it's an assignment. You'd become the note holder. Servicing can be transferred to your shop or remain boarded with ours. You pay the sub-servicer to manage it. You aware of the timelines. Notices right to cure foreclosure clocks. State requirements. I can read a clock, I said, but I'm not planning to ring the bell. She looked at me over the top of her glasses. Most buyers say that until a spreadsheet coughs. My spreadsheets don't cough, I said. They clear their throats. She printed nothing. She slid nothing across the desk with a wink. Good bankers don't. But when I stood, she said, if you were my brother, I'd tell you two things. Buy eyes on the property that aren't yours. We all think we know our own houses. Fresh BPO keeps you honest. 2, don't talk to the borrowers before you own the right to talk. Folks do dumb things when they're scared. Thank you, I said and meant it. Back in the lot, a wind had picked up, sweeping salt into little rivers. I sat in the truck and wrote down everything she hadn't said directly. I called the lawyer with the doc and asked him to set up a simple LLC, Red Cardinal Holdings, because I like names that remind me not to pretend I made any of this from scratch. He said he'd file that afternoon. I texted my fence post friend and asked for a clean NDA template. He sent one and added, you sure you want to hold a live one? I replied with a photograph of my hands. The callus is lined like old maps. He sent back a thumbs up and the words, then bid like you intend to repair, not repossess. Portfolio dispositions replied before lunch with a polite boilerplate, attach entity docs, attach proof of funds, sign NDA. We'll add you to the distribution for the next MPL tape. Single asset bids considered on a case-by-case basis. All sales as is, where is, with reps and warranties limited to authority and balance. It was the language of people who have learned to never promise more than the ink can bear. I signed, I attached, I sent. Between emails, I called the insurance agent who had insured my house back when my roof still believed in seasons. Hypothetically, I said, because lawyers make you like the word, what happens when the hazard lapses and the servicer force places? Premium triples, she said. Coverage shrinks. It protects the lender's interest, not the kitchen table. Borrower pays for a policy that won't keep their life from sliding off the counter. Best thing is reinstatement with proof. Also best thing no one does. I wrote hazard reinstatement in the notebook and underlined it. Then escrow shortage, letter. Then tax cert current. Words that to most people sound like sand to me grout. The stuff between the obvious pieces that decides whether the floor holds. In the afternoon, the tape arrived, an Excel sheet that looked like a census if a census cared about balances more than birthdays. Columns UPB, interest rate, last paid installment, days past due. FICO bands, occupancy, lien position, state. My son's loan was a row among rows, anonymous to everyone but me. The BPO put the house at a number I knew was fair, a number I had scrubbed mold for and painted trim against. Loss severity in a default scenario was high enough to make any spreadsheet want a nap. I timed my bid to what the bank wanted more than my conscience did. They wanted out with dignity. I wanted in with responsibility. I penciled a price that paid them better than a foreclosure would and worse than a fairy tale. I wrote a short cover note that said in more formal language, I plan to keep the borrowers in the home under a forbearance with conditions. I did not list the conditions, because you don't tell the test its answers before it's printed. I did say I would keep servicing with their shop for continuity. People who move files for a living respect continuity the way framers respect plumb. When I hovered over send, I thought of the door and the wreath, and the way my son's voice tightens when a number stands up in a room. I thought of my wife cutting oranges into quarters for kids in coats that didn't fit. I thought of the little brass fob shaped like a house and how heavy it used to be in my pocket. I did not think of winning. I thought of teaching. I sent the bid. The sun slid behind the strip mall across the street, and the parking lot turned from chalkboard to slate. A boy in a hoodie skated along the curb, wheels ticking over expansion joints like a metronome set for patience. My phone chimed. Receipt acknowledged. Review this week. I put the phone face down on the seat and let the heater soften the stiffness in my fingers. People imagine bargaining as a sport. It isn't. Not when you're bargaining for a lesson you hope will stick. I wasn't trying to punish a man. I was trying to buy back a chance for him to learn what a house really is. Not the walls. Not the deed. The promise under the paint. The one that says, if you're going to live here, bring more than your furniture. Bring your word. The number came in cold. It stared up from the broker price opinion like a thermometer left on a windowsill in January, 3 digits, a comma. 3 more. What the market would give a stranger for the house if the blinds were open, and the scent of someone else's breakfast still hung in the kitchen. It did not know the third stair's small complaint or the way the porch catches afternoon sun like a kept promise. Numbers don't know the way your hand learns a doorknob. I set the page beside my coffee and felt its chill through the wood. If you're going to bargain with a bank, you start with the frost and bring your own heat. Miss Kim's office still had a fake pine garland draped over a bookshelf, the kind with wire branches you can bend to look a little less like wire. She practiced the kind of law that keeps furniture from ending up on curb strips, notes, deeds of trust, lions, clocks. Her glasses had thin frames and her questions had thinner patience. Tell me the story, she said, not looking at me, looking at the packet I slid across her desk. The file is headed to a non-performing pool, I said. Nenti, 1 day's late, force-placed hazard. Escrow shortage, hoe dings. New servicer. Young borrowers who think autopay is character. She smiled without showing teeth. You're polite when you're angry. Her pen tapped once on the BPO. 2 paths, she said, drawing a fork in the air. Foreclosure. Judicial here, so you're looking at a notice of default. Right to cure, acceleration, complaint filed. Service answer or default, motion practice, a docket that depends on the judge's holiday plans, and frankly their patience for homeowners who don't read mail. Best case, 6 months to sale. Worst, 1.5 years, and that's if no one throws a wrench. Or, assignment. You take the paper, keep servicing with the current shop for continuity, and you hold the power to choose grace without announcing it on courthouse steps. Costs, I asked. Foreclosure eats everything, legal fees, force-placed premiums until you can fix them, property preservation if it goes vacant, taxes if escrow collapses, winterization if pipes burst. Assignment cost what you bid, and the monthly you pay the sub-servicer to handle calls, letters, and the drama of humanity. And risk. Same on both roads, she said, but different weather. Foreclosure invites weather you don't control. Assignment invites weather you can read and dress for. The risk no one calculates is whether the borrower learns anything when you're done. I thought about that while her printer spat out an NDA with the bank's letterhead. She slid it to me along with a pen and a look that said, You're not here because you like forms. I signed. She notarized. She sent the scan. Somewhere behind an email address, a desk clerk added me to a list of people the bank hopes are boring. Why are you doing this? She asked, softening because a human question had asked for her attention. Most men your age buy campers. Because I built a house and I'd like it to keep teaching. I said. Because my son changed the locks, and I'm trying not to change my heart. That, she said, is not in the statute. But it helps, and she capped her pen. By afternoon, portfolio dispositions sent a second file loan level. Less blur, more scar, payment history in gray bars like a heartbeat gone uneven. Insurance lapse dates. The sub-servicer's notes in the margin LM attempt, no answer LM attempt, left VM, letter sent, door tag. A photograph from the BPO front elevation, wreath slightly crooked. A recycling bin left 2 days too long at the curb. The market number sat there again, cold as before. If you've ever worked with lumber, you know the smell a board gives when you plane it down to new. It's a sweet smell, a little like a promise you forgot you made. Numbers can smell that way if you hold them long enough, you begin to catch the work that could be done with them. The bank's model, in a tidy column, showed loss severity if the loan went to sale. It put a discount on my bid like a pawnbroker looking at a wedding ring and seeing only gold weight. The story in those cells said, Get out clean now. I don't blame banks for liking clean exits. I blame them when they forget houses aren't just inventory. This desk hadn't forgotten. It had simply written its part and waited for someone else to write theirs. I penciled scenarios on a legal pad the way a man draws rafters before he lifts them, timelines. Interest credited if a plan held, penalties forgiven for behavior instead of apology. I wrote the word forbearance and next to it, conditions, then a small list of conditions. Proof of hazard reinstatement, taxes current, HOA cleared, payments diverted to a scholarship fund with a name that means something in our family. Every condition had a version of the same sentence under it: teach by doing, not by punishing. At 4 o'clock, the bank set a best and final call for bids in the pool. The man on the phone sounded like all men on those calls: professional, kind, allergic to adjectives. We were not his story, we were his stack. I gave him my number for the single asset, not the pool, and the sentence you say when you aren't bluffing: I'll keep servicing with your shop. I'm here to repair, not repossess. He didn't say anything sentimental. He said, your price implies you understand the collateral and the work. Then, because desks like to know who is on the other end of the line, he added, what's your exit if the borrower refuses? None you'd put on a postcard. I said, but it's legal, and it's slower than a sheriff. When the call ended, I dialed the insurance agent from the old days and put her on speaker while I cleaned a wrench with a rag that had seen 100 bolts. We can reinstate hazard if they pay the arrears and sign the affidavit that there were no claims during the lapse, she said. If they won't, force, place stays. And you'll hate the premium? I already do, I said. But hate is cheaper than a burst pipe. Not in February, she said, and we both laughed like people who have bled for basements. Ms. Kim texted entity is live, Red Cardinal Holdings. The name I picked to remind myself that a small red bird once guarded a door better than pride. I forwarded the certificate to the bank along with a clean PDF of my proof of funds. No chest beating, just the kind of paper that doesn't cough. Near dusk, the email came. Conditional acceptance, assignment of mortgage and note. The price was exactly where I had placed it, which meant their model and mine had shaken hands. Reps and warranties limited to balance and authority. No promises about the condition of a kitchen I knew by heart. The closing timeline was fast because desks like to see deals leave their inboxes like snow melting off steps. I drove to the house not because the file required it, but because my feet do. I parked across the street, same as always, and looked at the window where a tree used to reflect. Lights were on. 2 figures moved in the living room. The wreath still leaned to one side as if it had made peace with its angle. To the left of the porch, the hose bib had a cheap foam cover. A good sign occasionally means someone read a list. I thought about the power the paper would give me the right to press, to pace, to threaten, to sell. It is a strange thing to hold that much control over a door you once opened with your shoulder when your hands were full of groceries. There is a kind of strength that flexes in the mirror and calls it justice. There is another kind that sits down with a calculator and calls it responsibility. I chose the second. Assignment, not a march toward auction. I would take the note and keep the servicer and write to my son, not as a father, but as a lender who knows the house better than any underwriter ever will. I would offer a forbearance with terms that moved the money away from me and toward a room where a kid could hear his grandmother's name and feel the floor steady under her chair. Late fees shaved when hours were hammered at a school roof. No speeches, receipts. Back home, I signed what the bank needed signed, ACH instructions, wire details, the long paragraphs that say if a stranger knocks on a door with a clipboard, it will be because you asked for it. Ms. Kim reviewed, initialed, slid them back. This buys you the choice, she said. Don't spend it all at once. Choice is the point, I said. She paused at the threshold of her office. You know, she added, we could win faster in court. Winning is not always the lesson, I said. Staying is. She let the door click softly behind her. The wire left my account the next morning, a river changing course with a silent click. Somewhere, a ledger blinked, and in that blink the paper that decides doors had my name on it again. Not the deed that stays where it is. The promise above it, the one that can open without throwing anyone into the cold. The word title sat at the top of the packet like a small crown. Under it, my name. Not on leave that where it is. On the paper that tells the money which door to knock on. Paper opens what brass can't. A key, yes. But flat, fibrous, signed in a blue that bled a little at the loops. The kind of blue that means a hand was here. Closing did not feel like a ceremony. It felt like a Tuesday in a quiet office where a copier hums and a clock forgets to tick. Ms. Kim lined the documents like joists on sources. Assignment of mortgage. A launch to note. Bailey letter. A cashier's check stub stapled to a confirmation wire accepted. Consideration received. The custodian signed for the collateral file. Original note. Recorded deed of trust riders with paragraphs about escrows and occupancy and words no one reads until they need to. Each sheet wore a stamp, some wet, some digital. That turned opinion into record. Counties are slow this week, Ms. Kim said, sliding a manila folder toward me. Recordings will catch up. For your shelf true copies. Originals stay with the custodian. She tapped a page.
You here. She tapped another.
Servicer here. Borrower. Here. Everyone knows where to stand. I nodded. Men who build learn early that standing in the right place keeps things from falling. I drove a copy to the branch. Perez met me near the copier with a smile that did not waste itself. Congratulations, she said in the voice bankers use when they mean, you just picked up a weight and you know it. We'll push the Lionholder update to the insurance desk. Mortgagee clause needs your entity Red Cardinal Holdings, care of Greenfield Servicing, with the full address. You'll get the hello letter. Your son will get the goodbye and the low. Federal law loves symmetry. Tax certs, I asked. Current. Escrow shows short by 2 months after force placed backfill. Servicer will draft a spread if you allow it. She looked up. Do you? I allow common sense, I said. And heat. Back in my truck I called the insurance agent, gave her the clause verbatim, and asked for proof of reinstatement once the borrower signed the affidavit. If they balk, she said. Then force. Placed hovers until someone remembers February is coming, I said. February has a good memory, she said, and promised to send the binder the moment a signature hit her screen. The sub-servicer's portal gave me a login that looked like a license plate. Letters and numbers that would never mean anything to a human mouth. On the other side of the fence, status new investor boarding complete, borrowed owner occupied, days past due 91, loss mitigation attempts 4, next step right to cure letters sent. It was a garden of beige rectangles with red corners, and still it felt like a beating heart. People live inside those pixels. People sleep under roofs that have colors and corners and drafty seams only they know. The custodian overnighted a certified copy of the note with my allonge clipped to it. The clip left a mark. It felt like looking at an X-ray and recognizing your own bones. Names, amounts, dates, the writer where they initialed, young, eager initials that believed signatures could grow up to be promises. On the back, the endorsements like handshakes in a line that ended with me. Not a triumph, a transfer of duty. Legally, Ms. Kim said when I called her, you are the note holder. The right to enforce follows the note. The deed of trust trails obediently behind. Keep servicing with Greenfield, let them send the letters. No coffee, shop conversations, no driveway diplomacy. Treat them like borrowers until they remember their family. Understood? I said, and I did. That afternoon the servicer emailed their script for a standard plan. 3 months trial payments at X, then a review for a permanent mod. Interest possibly capitalized, fees spread, escrow recalculated. It was the language of rescue that teaches little but relief. I stared at the screen and saw what would happen. They would pay, because fear can pay for a while. Then fear would get tired. Then we'd be back where we started, except colder. I called the loss mit desk and asked for a human I could work with. A voice named Darnell answered. He had the calm tone of someone who has heard every way a person can apologize without changing. I said, I'm not looking to dump the file. I'm looking to use it. That's not a sentence I hear, he said, curious. I want a forbearance with conditions the system doesn't usually carry, I said. I want performance to buy teaching. We'll keep payments through you, posted like any other. But I want credits and fee waivers only when I get proof of 2 things. Hazard reinstated and a donation in equal amount to a local scholarship fund. Grandma Rose, that's the name, administered by the school district. They show me receipts. I instruct you to apply curtailments and waive. They don't, you apply as normal. We don't route to third parties. He said reflexively. I'm not asking you to, I said. I'm asking you to apply incentives only when I produce proof. Side letter between lender and borrower, you keep the ledger straight. You do letters, I do teaching. He was quiet long enough for me to imagine his screen. We can add investor-directed concessions, he said. We can code fee waivers on verified documentation. It's not elegant. Houses aren't elegant, I said. They're plumb. Or they're not. He chuckled. Okay, we'll draft a non-standard forbearance 3 months trial at the scheduled P&I plus escrow. Late fees waived upon I hazard binder received, a B proof of donation to named fund. After 3, we reevaluate. If they comply, we consider rate reduction or term extension. I'll need the fund details. I gave him Principal Davis's office number and the district's tax ID. He whistled softly. Most people want to press. You want to pivot. I want him to pay warmth forward, I said. It's cheaper than bitterness. We set the notice cadence. Right? To cure had already gone. The hello goodbye letters would land in their mailbox by Friday. A door tag would follow if phones kept ringing into pillows. I wrote the dates in my notebook the way a man marks studs behind drywall. Memory can lie. Pencil doesn't. There is a ceremony to becoming a holder that no one attends. It involves a metal drawer. At home, I cleared the bottom drawer of my father's old desk. I laid a sheet of clean craft paper down like a tablecloth no one will see but everyone feels. The collateral copies went in note, deed of trust, rider's assignment, my copy of the allonge. On top of it I placed the letter I planned to send only after the servicer's schedule had its say. At the very bottom, a photograph of my wife at the kitchen counter, cutting oranges into quarters, the knife catching winter sun. Call it a reminder to cut things small enough to chew. At dusk, I drove past the house. The porch light was on, in that way a porch light can be. Confident, like it assumes its job matters. A package leaned against the post. I did not go up. I sat across the street and looked at the shape of a window I could draw from memory. Somewhere inside, my son's life moved in loops I used to know by heart. Keys in the bowl. Shoes kicked near the mat, laughter if it was a good day, a long silence if it wasn't. I could have felt powerful. I didn't. I felt responsible the way you feel when you put a beam up and step back and realize the next piece depends on how true this one is. I had the right to press the system into motion. Notices, postings, auctions, strangers carrying boxes through rooms whose corners I once sanded. The paper gave me that. But paper can also hold a pause. It can put its palm up to the law and say, wait, not to deny it, to direct it. That night I wrote a letter I would not yet deliver. Dear borrowers, this is your lender writing with the authority you already know, and the knowledge you do not. I know the house. I know how the third stair complains, and I know how winter enters around the back door if you let it. I know money is a teacher that can be cruel or clear. I am choosing clear. Here is a plan that keeps heat in and dignity intact. 3 payments at the scheduled amount. Hazard insurance reinstated. How it cleared. Along with each payment, proof of a donation for the same amount to the Grandma Rose Scholarship at the district office on Maple. Send those receipts to me, for each one. I will instruct the servicer to waive fees and reduce what you owe in a way that helps you more than it helps me. Miss the terms, and the usual clock runs. Keep them, and you will learn the price of warmth in a currency that outlasts winter. I folded it and slid it into the drawer on top of the copies. I marked the envelope with a small red dot in the corner. A cardinal. A reminder to be cheerful at a door. The next morning, the county recorder's online index pinged an update. Assignment, recording pending. The servicer portal switched a status light from yellow to green, investor active. My phone buzzed with a text from Darnell. Hello, goodbye, letters out. Forbearance draft ready when you want it, miss. Perez's email landed 2 minutes later with a line that made something. Some tight muscle under my ribs. Let go. Lien holder updated with insurer. Binder to follow upon borrower affidavit. On the way home, I stopped at a hardware store just to touch things that make sense. I ran my fingers over a rack of thermostats. People buy them to control heat. What most of them want is to control weather. You can't. You can only choose not to open the window when it's snowing. That's all this was. A window closed against a storm, a plan to keep the pipes from bursting, a lesson folded into a clause. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my name had settled on the paper like dust on a beam. You don't notice it until the sun comes through and shows you where everything really sits. I was the note holder. The door across town stayed shut, and rightly so. Keys are not the point tonight. Choices. I wrote 3 words in a plain font and folded the paper twice. Contact your lender. No name, no threat. I slid the envelope under the mat where grit and salt keep secrets. The porch light hummed. The wreath still leaned as if listening. I sat in the truck across the street and watched the window the way a man watches a level bubble, waiting for the truth to settle. 10 minutes. 15. The door opened. My son's foot found the envelope and paused. He bent, picked it up, and read. His head snapped up like a hinge catching. The call came before my engine could cool. Did you put this here? He said. No, hello. Yes, I said. Why are you doing this? Why are you hovering? His voice had the thin metal edge a ruler gets when you bend it too far. I'm not hovering, I said. I'm asking you to read your mail. There was rustle, then her voice on speaker, sharp, efficient. This is manipulative, Mr. Dalton. You don't leave cryptic notes. You call. Or better, you don't involve yourself at all. We're independent. Then read the hello goodbye letter you got this week, I said. Second paragraph. Your loan has been transferred to a new investor. Read the line with the name. A beat, papers flipped, a low exhale. She read out loud as if the words might change if she softened them. Read Cardinal Holdings. That's me, I said. I'm the new lender of record. Silence reached into the cab and sat between us. "You can't do that," she said finally, as if volume could work on facts. "I can," I said, and I did. "And I'm calling as your lender, not as your father, to tell you two things. One, the servicer, Greenfield, handles contact, you call them, not me to set appointments and send documents. Two, you have a choice to make. Two paths, both keep you in the house. Both require heat and honesty. You think you can scare us," my son said, but the sentence leaned, looking for a wall. "I'm not scaring you," I said. "I'm giving you a way to pay the price of warmth without paying in shame." He put the phone closer to his mouth. I could hear the wreath brush the door as if it wanted to hear too. "Path 1?" I said. "Standard forbearance. 3 months at the scheduled principal interest, and escrow through the servicer. Hazard insurance reinstated with your signature. Choe fines cleared. Late fees are waived as the documents arrive. Actual binders and receipts. Not promises. You do that. We sit down after 3 months and we talk about permanent terms the math can hold. And path 2, she said, clip, like she was taking notes for a fight. Path 2, I said, is a redirection. You still pay escrow to the servicer. Taxes and insurance don't wait. But for principal and interest, each month you send that amount to the Grandma Rose Scholarship at the district office on Maple. You send me the school's receipt. For each receipt, I instruct the servicer to credit that month's principal and waive late fees. No speeches. Only receipts. If you miss a month, the usual clock runs. If you keep the receipts, a few kids hear your grandmother's name and sit a little steadier in class. That's extortion dressed as charity, she said. It's a ledger, I said. You've been asking for independence. Independence comes with invoices. This one happens to put warmth where it grows. My son tried to wedge a joke into the gap. So we pay you by giving money away? You pay your debt by learning what money can carry besides furniture, I said. You still do the hard parts. Hazard back in place. Echoe cleared, escrow current. The difference is where the principal lands before the credit hits your account. I will take my return in knowing your grandmother's name is said out loud where it never was. He was quiet long enough to hear a dog bark 2 houses down. When he spoke, he sounded younger. Why didn't you just, he began, and stopped, because he knew the word. Evict. It didn't want to be said in his house. Because I remember what it feels like to turn a key and know a door has been waiting for you, I said. I'm not taking that from you. I'm asking you to learn what it costs to keep it. You're trying to control us, she said. This is control. Control would be a lockbox on your porch and a posting on your lawn, I said. This is choice. You pick the path. You call the servicer. They'll have both options on file. If you want a third, bring a math that holds. What if we refinance? He said quickly, as if escape could be conjured by syllables. Then bring a bank that will look at your last 3 months and say yes, I said. It would be the first time fear cured a ledger. He didn't like that sentence, but he didn't hang up. Pride stayed on the line with both of us. How long do we have? He asked. Greenfield's right. To cure letter gives you dates, I said. But here's mine, call them within 48 hours. Set a time. Choose a path. If you choose path 2, I'll hand deliver the scholarship details in a sealed envelope, and you can pretend I'm a courier. You'll come here, he said, surprised by his own yes. I will walk to the edge of your porch, I said. I won't cross a threshold uninvited. She made a sound between a laugh and a scoff. This is sentimental theater. No, I said. This is plumbing. Pipes burst when no one pays attention. I'm paying attention. On the street, a delivery van slid by, tires whispering on salt. The world went on buying and delivering and signing for packages that were not as heavy as this one. My son cleared his throat. Dad, he said, the word slipping out before it could be replaced with a safer title. Do you really think Grandma would want this? I think she'd hand you an envelope and a bag of oranges and tell you not to waste either, I said. She'd tell you to sign what you mean and bring a coat. I hate this, he said, and then softer, I hate that it's you. I know, I said. It's easier to hate a bank. If you need to hate me for a while to keep your house, I can stand it. She wasn't ready to give me that. We'll call Greenfield, she said, ice back in place. And we'll review our options. That's the right sentence, I said. Use it on the phone. They'll know where to route you. I hung up and let the heater do its steady, ordinary work. Across the street, the door opened again. The envelope I had tucked under the mat was gone. In its place, for half a second, I saw a corner of something white in my son's hand. He stepped back into the warm, and the door clicked shut with the same small, final sound locks make when they've chosen a side. 2 hours later, Darnell at Greenfield texted borrowers called. Apt set. Want to hear scholarship path? I put my phone face down and looked at my hands. They looked like they always have, scarred, steady, good at carrying weight from one end of a room to the other without dropping it. The agreement had a line I've never seen on bank paper. Monthly payment diverted to Grandma Rose scholarship. Darnell printed it on heavy stock, the kind that makes ballpoints behave. We sat in a conference room that smelled like coffee and carpet glue. He slid the pages across as if they might spook if moved too fast. Here's how this works, he said, tapping the paragraph with a square fingernail. Scro, taxes and hazard, still flows through us like normal. No one negotiates gravity. The principal and interest amount you'd normally send to Greenfield goes instead to the district office on Maple, payable to Grandma Rose scholarship. You bring or email a receipt. When we see that receipt, your investor. He flicked eyes at me, directs us to credit that month's principal and waive accrued late fees per the side letter. He flipped to the side letter. It said in tidy words what I'd already told them on the phone: fee waivers on receipt of Xi hazard binder, IB proof of hay cleared, see scholarship receipt. Below that, another line that made the paper feel less like a trap and more like a tool: community credit for each verified hour of approved service, school maintenance day, habitat build, food pantry shift, library tutoring up to 8 hours month. An additional 25 investor-directed curtailment will be applied to principal. Documentation required. My daughter-in-law leaned back, arms locked across her chest, as if the words might try to climb off the page and rearrange her furniture. So we pay the school instead of you, she said. And then you forgive things when we jump through your hoops. You pay your obligation, I said. We wrote the lesson. She turned to Darnell. Is this even legal? He didn't flinch. Loss, men don't. Investor-directed concessions are allowed. We manage the ledger. They manage their conditions. We don't cut checks to third parties. We only post credits when the investor gives us a code and the documentation clears. If you don't like the scholarship path, flip to page 3. That's the standard plan. 3 months trial. Then a permanent mod review. My son ran his thumb along the edge of the paper, a nervous carpenter checking for splinters. What happens if we make the school payment late? Then we apply your month like any other delinquent, Darnell said. No magic. The scholarship path only helps if you walk it. And the hazard insurance? I asked, though we all knew the answer. Some questions you ask to put them on the table where everyone can see them. Binder required within 30 days, Darnell said. Force place drops when your policy reinstates. If you don't reinstate, the math gets mean. She shot me a look over the rim of her glasses. This is moral theater, Mr. Plague. Dalton, this is plumbing, I said. It keeps houses from bursting. My son half smiled, then let it die. What if we volunteer and donate and do all this, and we still feel like we're being punished? You won't be punished, I said. You'll be tired. Work does that. But tired is a better teacher than shame. He turned the page again. The line stared back: monthly payment diverted. He tested it in his mouth. Grandma Rose, he said, quieter, like a name said in a church when the sound of your own voice surprises you. Darnell slid a second stack forward. Here are the boring parts you'll want to read anyway, he said. Right to cure dates, payment method, document list, approved community partners, school district, habitat, pantry, library. Each has a sign-in sheet. No selfies required. She exhaled through her nose. And what do we get for showing up and hammering shingles in the cold? A gold star. A roof that keeps other kids dry, I said. And a fee that vanishes because you did a thing you can point at instead of a thing you can only swear you'll do next time. She snapped the folder shut. This is a sermon. My son looked at me, waiting. No, I said. This is mirrors. I tapped the line again. Money can be glass. You hold it up and see who you are when you spend it. You've been asking to be independent. This is independence with reflection. So you're what? He said. A small laugh stuck to the word. My lender and my rabbi? I'm your lender, I said. And your father? Only one of those has signatures. Both have obligations. He set his palm on the paper like he was testing its temperature. What if we refinance? He said again, because men revisit exits even when they can't see them. Bring me a pre-approval in 30 days, I said. A real one. If it exists, I'll cooperate. If it doesn't, we do work right here. Darnell cleared his throat softly, the professional way to move a room back to business. We can start Friday if you choose the scholarship path. The district office takes payments by check, cashier's check, or online transfer. They issue immediate receipts. You email us the PDF. We post within 2 business days. The fee waiver code is investor controlled. If you miss a step, fees accrue like they would for anyone else. And the community credit? My son asked, reading it and failing to hide curiosity. Principal curtailment applied when you turn in signed hours from an approved partner, Darnell said. It's small. It adds up. He nodded like a math student who doesn't want to admit the equation is beautiful. My daughter-in-law touched his elbow. We should have our lawyer look at this, she said.
We shouldn't just do that,
I said. Have them call Ms. Kim. Her number's on the side letter. Bring whoever you need. Just bring them before the dates on page 2 turn into the dates on page 5. Page 5, she said, flipping. The word acceleration sat there like a winter word. No one in this room wants that, Darnell said, not unkindly. Pick a path and we'll help you walk it. That's what we do. My son stared at the signature line as if it were a frozen pond he wasn't sure would hold him. This is Yu Menghigu Sixi, he said finally. Half to me, half to the ceiling. You're scolding with money. I shook my head. No, I'm buying you a mirror. He blinked. A mirror. So when you pay, I said, you watch the kind of man you're becoming while you do. Not after. Not someday, when there's time for a long speech. In the act. You drop a check on Maple, and a kid hears your grandmother's name called at an assembly in March. You swing a hammer on a Saturday, and a leak doesn't ruin a library book. Then you send me the proof, and I call Darnell, and something ugly we owed gets smaller. It's simple. He swallowed. The room hummed the way rooms do when a decision hovers just out of reach. Outside, a salt truck hissed past the window. Crystals clicked against glass and fell. Can we talk about it tonight? He asked Darnell. We won't ghost you. We'll call by tomorrow at noon. That's within the cure timeline, Darnell said. Noon's fine. My extension's on the folder. They stood. She tucked the papers into a purse not built to carry such weight. He squeezed the folder at the spine like it might otherwise open and spill his life onto the floor. At the door, he turned. If we do the scholarship thing, he said. Do we have to tell people? No, I said. You have to show them. He nodded like a boy remembering how to nod. On the sidewalk, wind pushed their coats against their bodies. They walked shoulder to shoulder, arguing in low heat, the way couples do when the subject is money but the topic is pride. I watched from the lobby until the glass stopped shaking. Darnell gathered the extra copies. Most folks ask me if there's an easier way, he said. There isn't, I said. He tucked the file into a folder labeled with the loan number and not our name. I'll be here at noon, he said. Either way. I sat in my truck a long time with the engine off, hands on the wheel like a man waiting for a light that's actually a stop sign. The folder on my lap held a line that turned money into glass. I could see my face in it if I tried. Older than I thought. Still mine. Still responsible for where the heat goes next. They said they'd call by noon. They did. Then an hour later my servicer portal flashed a new tile. Payoff quote requested. Third, party authorization on file. Somewhere in a strip mall, a mortgage broker had said the word refi like a trapdoor. I let it be. People have to test the exits before they learn the value of a door. That evening my son rang me from the garage. The echo on his voice told me he hadn't gone inside yet. Dad, I need the mortgagee clause again, he said, pretending he didn't already have it. And the servicer fax for a VOE, verification of everything. He joked, trying to keep it light. Greenfield has it? I said. They'll answer whatever a broker needs. And left the silence there to do its work. 2 days of calls followed that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with math. I know the sound of a loan officer when a score spits back uglier than the conversation expected. The voice goes cheerful and thin. The sentences get crowded with should and maybe, and if we can just. I heard that voice not with my ears, but in the way my son's texts went from confident to clipped. They said our mid-score is off because of the 90 late. They said the AUS said, refer caution. They said we need 3 on-time months, no new derogatories, and insurance current. Insurance. The force-placed policy was still sitting there like a punitive coat. Expensive, bulky, not built to keep a family warm. The renewal notice would hit in 9 days. The broker's email, forwarded by my son without comment, added another pinch, hazard binder required. Continuous coverage preferred. No lender wants to hear you let your house go naked in January. The HOA chimed in like they always do when they want to be part of a story. A letter with a tasteful logo and a tone that tries to be kind, friendly reminder turned formal notice. Lawn violations bins out past pickup. A Christmas arch still blinking in March. The fine wasn't ruinous. It was merely cumulative, the way water finds its level in the wrong room if you don't check the seal. My son called late, filling his sentences with half-finished plans. There's this non-QM guy, he said. No income docs, bank statements. He says we could go 12 months interest only, then refinance when rates drop. Does your roof understand interest only? I asked. Do the steps? Does the furnace? He sighed. You're doing that thing where you turn numbers into chores. They're the same thing, I said. You either take care of them, or they take care of you. The next morning Darnell sent me a courtesy note. Borrowers requested payoff. Provided. Broker asked about late fee reversal upon payoff. Answered, investor discretion. I wrote let them try in my notebook and underlined insurance twice. By Friday the broker's cheer had thinned to thread. They wanted letters of explanation for the 90-day late. They wanted proof the HOA was cleared. They wanted a hazard binder that did not say force placed. They wanted a budget that made the new payment and the rest of the life fit on the same plate. Automated underwriting had said no in the polite way machines do, and now a human was trying to talk it into a maybe. That afternoon my phone lit with an unfamiliar number. I answered, and the voice was her, polished tight. We have a solution, my daughter-in-law said. We will buy you out. I'm listening, I said. You tell us what you paid for the note. We will pay you that amount and take back our mortgage. She said like a magician offering to make a coin disappear. My coin. With what? I asked, gentle as I could make a question that had edges. With our money, she said. From our accounts. The gift you gave for the down payment, and the wedding gift and the... I let her hear herself. She cleared her throat. It's still our money now. It was a gift, I said. Gifts don't earn interest. They don't circle back pretending to be rescue. You're making this moral, she said. I'm making it accurate, I said. You'd be returning what I gave, so you don't have to learn what paying means. There was a click of her tongue against her teeth, small and sharp. Fine. Then we refinance with a hard money lender. We'll take the hit for a year and be done with you. Then bring me the offer, I said, in writing, with a rate that doesn't require a helmet. My son took the phone. His voice came in low like a man trying not to inflame a stove. Dad, can we just get a payoff and end this? We can't live like this. You're living like a house with a bucket under a leak, I said. You can, for a while. But the joist remembers. He didn't answer. The bucket in his head was full. That night the HOA fine posted. The servicer portal turned the red corner on a tile brighter. Darnell texted, insurance binder still missing. My pencil darkened the date on the right to cure letter. Clocks are not vindictive, they're faithful. Morning brought the last piece I needed to say what I had to say without shouting. The broker emailed them that the file would be re-reviewed if they could show 3 consecutive on time and current hazard. He wrote kindly, we can revisit in a quarter if you stabilize. The word stabilize is what bankers use when they mean grow up. I drove over with 2 envelopes. One had the scholarship path details and a check image with Grandma Rose printed in the memo line. Just a picture, to show how ordinary it looks to do something extraordinary on purpose. The other had a letter on servicer letterhead that my hand had not touched except to fold. No driveway negotiations, no porch sermons. I waited in the truck until I saw their car in the drive. Then I walked to the steps and slid, both under the mat, as if I were returning a library book. The door opened before I got back to the curb. Stop leaving things, she said.
Text like a normal person.
I'm not normal in this, I said. I'm your lender, and your father. Neither of those belong in text bubbles. My son stood behind her, jaw tight, eyes tired. Just tell me the bottom line, he said. Insurance binder by close of business Tuesday. I said, Archoa paid by Friday. Pick a plan with Greenfield by then, standard or scholarship. If neither is chosen, acceleration proceeds, and the choices get loud in public. I don't want that for you. I don't want that for the house. He looked away toward the maple, bare now, branches thin as the patience in the room. You really won't just let us refinance. I'll help you refinance when you've shown any bank the 3 things they want. On time, insured calm. I said, you can't borrow those. You earn them month by month. She folded her arms tighter. Name your price to walk away. I did, I said softly. I named it in March of your wedding year when I wrote a check and called it a gift. I named it every Saturday I fixed what squeaked. I'm not selling what I'm trying to give. What are you giving? She said, exasperation rising. A way to live here without pretending money is magic, I said. A way to pay warmth forward, a mirror. My son rubbed his forehead with the heel of his hand. This is humiliating. This is useful, I said. Humiliation is when strangers post your life on a legal website. Usefulness is when you choose a hard thing before it chooses you. He let out a small sound that might have been a laugh if the oxygen were better. You always did talk like a manual, he said. I've never met a good manual that lied, I said. We stood there with the wreath between us, humming softly. A neighbor's dog barked. A mail truck bumped over a seam in the street and kept going. Ordinary noises. The kind that keep a house from thinking it's an island. I'll call Greenfield, he said finally. Today, good, I said. And call the insurance agent. She's waiting to forgive the lapse if you sign the affidavit like an adult. He nodded once, the kind of nod that happens when a boy and a man inside the same skin take a vote and the man wins by 1. I turned to go. She couldn't help herself. You know, she said, if you had just kept your gifts and your advice, none of this would be happening. I stopped at the sidewalk and looked back. If I had kept my gifts, I said, none of this house would exist. She blinked. He looked at the porch rail and traced a finger over a notch I'd cut wrong and filled right 20 years ago. He knew the spot. He'd sanded it once, trying to make it disappear. The fill had held. You could see it if you knew where to look. Back in my truck, Darnell's text waited. Broker withdrew payoff request. Borrower's scheduled call 3. I set the phone face down and watched my breath fog the windshield and clear. The ultimatum wasn't a yell. It was a thermostat set to heat. The shoebox lived on the top shelf of the hall closet, under old scarves and beside a can of furniture polish that had turned to varnish without ever being opened. I set it on the kitchen table and lifted the lid. The smell that rose wasn't dust, it was Sunday school rooms and coffee breath and winter coats drying near radiators. On top lay a picture of Rose, my wife's mother, wearing a dress the color of church carpet and a smile that could talk a person out of hiding. Underneath that, an envelope, thin as onion skin and soft from being handled First Baptist scholarship, their fifth dime. No memo line, just her careful cursive for books. Rose split her social security into envelopes with names that were not her own. Missions. Music. That girl at the laundromat. She'd lick the flap and say, money's not shy when it's supposed to help. Once, when I thanked her too loudly, she put a finger to my lips. Say thank you with your hands. She whispered. Chairs need stacking. Dishes need washing. If you only ever say it, you don't mean it yet. The scholarship receipt from the school district pinged my email at 9:07 a.m. A PDF with a stamp and the kind of font governments use when they want to prove they aren't making it up. Amount to 342.76 Donor Red Cardinal Holdings. The amount looked odd because mortgages never divide cleanly. They always leave pennies that remember they were once nickels. I printed it, slid it into the box beside Rose's envelope, and called Principal Davis. She answered on the second ring with that clipped warm schools learn hurried, but not in a hurry. Mr. Dalton!
Yes, ma'am,
I said. I'm the man who kept promising you a fund and finally brought it where it belongs. I've got your paperwork, she said, smiling through a sigh I could hear. We can move faster than you think. These halls are full of kids who could turn a check into a desk that doesn't wobble. I want to start small and close, I said. Boots for a boy who still walks to school. Textbooks for a girl whose backpack sags with hand-me-downs. A shop kid who shows up on Saturdays to sweep. Nothing that needs a gala. We do an all-school assembly Thursday, she said. We could name 3 Rose Awards, with a note about monthly cadence if the fund holds. It will hold, I said, and meant it, even though I knew the fund and my son's calendar were about to become dance partners. And I want one thing, if you can stand it. What can usually stand a thing? She said. Print the program so the presenter is my son's name, I said. Not mine. I'll be in the back, where men with calluses sit. There was a beat of quiet, the kind adults keep when a choice lands in the room. That might be the smartest stubbornness I've heard all week, she said. We'll make sure he gets the invite, on school letterhead. No driveway ambushes. Thank you, I said. And, Principal, could the certificate read in honor of Rose, not in memory? Of course, she said. Honors keep people in the room. Memories can send them walking. I hung up and stared at the box until the picture of Rose looked like she might start talking. In my head, she was rearranging chairs and telling me to quit staring. The floor scuffs won't rub themselves out. At noon, Darnell's email slid into my inbox, receipt verified. Late fees waived per investor code. Forbearance Month, one teen posted. He added a note: only a man who spends all day with strangers would risk nice work. I forwarded the scholarship receipt to him, not because he needed it, but because sometimes the back office deserves to see what their code does when it grows hands. I spent the afternoon in Principal Davis's office, a small room lined with college pennants and a poster that said, "Be kind. It confuses people." We spread out ideas like tools on a workbench. 3 awards to start attendance and grit. The kid who shows up even when the snowman outside the bus stop has better gloves. Quiet hands, who helps without the selfie. And tools and trades, she who wants a real hammer for her birthday. Amounts small enough to fit in a man's pocket, large enough to move a day. She showed me the draft program. The line that caught my breath came in the middle: Grandma Rose Scholarship, presented by Har, my son's name. "He'll get a letter from us this afternoon," she said. "We'll put it plain. As the donor of record, we invite you to present. I won't mention you. You can be a surprise on the bleachers if you like." I said, and felt ridiculous for the way the word shook. On the table between us, she set a plastic bowl and filled it with oranges from a tote bag under her desk. "Left over from the staff lounge," she said. "Our reading specialist calls them patient's quarters. Helps during assemblies." I turned one in my hand. The skin dimpled under my thumb like a memory. We walked the gym together after last bell. The floor wore that waxed shine that makes sneakers sing. Custodians moved chairs in by the dozens, metal legs scraping in honest chorus. On the wall, banners for teams that won when no one expected it, and for grades that turned reading into a competition kids wanted to join. Up in the rafters, a red bird had found its way inside. A cardinal had hopped along a beam and watched us, head cocked, cheerful enough to guard a door. At home, I wrote my son a note and put nothing extra in it. Principal Davis will host an assembly Thursday at 10 a.m. The program lists you as presenter for 3 small scholarships in honor of your grandmother, funded this month. The district office has details. RCH, I wrote it on letterhead and sent it by email because respect uses the road it's supposed to. Part of me wanted to call. Part of me wanted to stand on his porch and push the paper into his palm, the way I had placed a key there years before. The part of me that had learned to let systems do their work kept me at the table, hands flat, pen capped. After dinner, I took the shoebox down again. I added the printed program proof, with his name in a font that would look stiff from the bleachers, brave up close. I tucked the old envelope so it peeked out enough to be found first next time. I imagined Rose handing it to a kid with her shaky smile and her steady eyes. "Say thank you with your hands," she'd say, and point them toward the stack of chairs. The next morning, the district's email server did what municipal servers do best: send 3 messages in a row, each with the same attachment because someone forgot to add the listserv the first time, then added it twice. The subject line read, "Presenter confirmation, Thursday assembly." My son's name in the tow line made my chest feel like an uninspected flu. Too much pressure in a space built for less. I didn't text to ask if he saw it. I didn't call to ask if he'd come. The rule I had given myself held: be his lender in the systems that ask for one. Be his father in the silences that matter, and don't switch the signs. That afternoon, a woman in a grocery store aisle stopped me near the end caps where cookies pretend to be cereals. "Are you Mr. Dalton?" she asked, holding a toddler who was chewing on a flyer.
Sometimes,
I said. She laughed. "I'm Sam's mom. Principal Davis said a fund bought him boots today. He's the kind of kid that won't admit he needs socks." "Thank you." She reached for my arm, then decided against it, then reached again. "I mean it. Thank you." "Tell him to tie them tight," I said. "Boots are happier when they feel you trying." She left. I stood there with a box of oranges in my cart and a timeline in my head. Thursday at 10. Bleachers. My son's name on a program. A microphone that would whine once before it behaved. Kids who would clap too long because clapping is easier than seeing. After dark, the house across town lit up, every room a square of yellow. I parked where I always do, across from the maple that had gone to bone for the season, and watched 2 figures move through the living room like sentences that weren't sure of their verbs. I didn't get out. I didn't wave. The door is a proud thing. It has learned not to perform. On my table, next to the shoebox, I laid out the certificates Principal Davis would have printed by morning. The paper was thicker than the old envelope, but thinner than bank stock. Each one said Grandma Rose Scholarship in letters that refused to shout. Each had a blank where my son's hand would go, under the line presented by his name. I traced it with a finger, the way a carpenter runs a palm over a chair back he has sanded until it stops catching shirts. A red ceramic cardinal kept its post on my sill. A different bird from a different porch, but with the same job description, look cheerful, keep watch. I set one orange beside it. Not as a symbol, as a thing you can peel when nerves get loud. I went to bed with the shoebox still open. Rose looked up at the ceiling as if counting cracks. Say thank you with your hands, her picture said without moving. Tomorrow, if all went the way a house hopes, my son would lift a microphone, not a hammer. It would still be work. He would have to hold his name steady in his mouth, and let a gym full of kids borrow it for a minute. He would have to shake a hand he did not expect and hear a stranger say, "We appreciate you," and not correct the grammar of what they meant. I turned off the lamp and let the room go dark. Somewhere inside that darkness was a gym, a stack of chairs, a bowl of oranges, a red bird on a beam, and a name that used to be a lock turning into a door. The gym smelled like wax and winter coats. Custodians had stacked chairs like small fences along the walls. A microphone stood at half height, waiting to clear its throat. The whole 5th grade filed in with the manners of a parade that has been told 3 times to be quiet. On the scores table sat a plastic bowl of oranges. Someone had written Pediance on an index card and taped it to the rim. I took a seat high in the bleachers where fathers go when they are not invited and still come. Principal Davis crossed the floor with a clipboard tucked under her arm, and that brisk kindness schools learn. The PA popped once, twice, then admitted defeat and settled into a steady buzz. My son stood just off stage, program in his hand. The paper had been folded and unfolded enough to look like it had lived a week in his pocket. He wore the jacket he saves for interviews. It didn't fit like it used to. Men change between questions. He looked down at his shoes, then up at the rafters, where a red cardinal hopped along a beam as if it had a ticket. The band teacher finished tuning a trumpet no one would play. Principal Davis stepped to the mic. "Good morning," she said, and 100 shuffles became a hush. "Today we get to hand out 3 small scholarships in honor of Rose, who believed money belongs in envelopes that travel. She was a grandmother in this district and a volunteer of the most useful kind, the kind you meet near a sink." The kids laughed, because they've all seen sinks and the adults who live there. "When we needed to raise money for field trips," Davis went on, "Rose didn't start with a speech. She started with dishes. She stacked chairs. She taped flyers to the glass doors when her hands shook too much to write. She wrote for books, on the memo line of checks that could have bought her nicer shoes. She called that saying thank you with your hands. She let that live in the air, the way a teacher knows a sentence earns more if it sits a second. Then she smiled at the wings. Presenting our Grandma Rose Awards today is," she read his name, the full one. The name I scratched on a drywall scrap once when he was 2 and could not reach the pen, who asked to keep this simple. He walked to the microphone like a man negotiating with a dock that moves under him. A good crossing, anyway. Up close, his face was red the way winter does to people who aren't ready for eyes. He adjusted the mic. He adjusted the paper. He adjusted an idea about himself that didn't fit either. He said. The sound bounced once, then landed right. He said his name again, slower. "My grandmother's name was Rose." His voice caught on grand and came down soft on mother. You could hear the gym listen. "The first award," he said, reading and then not reading, is attendance and grit. "It goes to someone who keeps showing up." He called a boy's name. The kid sprang like a coiled yardstick, gate wide, laces flapping. My son shook his hand twice, then remembered he was supposed to hand him an envelope, too. The boy shoved the envelope into his hoodie pocket and lifted it again, unsure if he was supposed to show it off or hide it like treasure. The gym cheered, a full, warm sound. "The second is quiet hands," my son said, and his mouth tugged at a smile that looked like him at 8, for helping without the selfie. The girl they called walked measured steps, because measured steps make you taller. My son bent a little so the mic would catch her name when she whispered it to him. He said it into the room on her behalf, and she stood there long enough to let the syllables belong to her. The envelope looked heavy in her palm. She held it with 2 hands. "The third is tools and trades," he said. "This one," he looked down, he looked up. He folded the program the other way, like a man buying time with geometry. "This one is for someone who wants to fix things you can point to later. My grandmother liked that kind of work." He swallowed. Grandma liked that kind of work. There it was. Grandma. Not in a kitchen, not in a car. Into a microphone. In a gym that turned the word into something bigger and passed it along the rows like a bait, and he said it again. Not louder. Truer. "Grandma." He called the name. A small boy in a borrowed collared shirt stood up slowly. His mother put a hand on his back, then let it fall, then lifted it again and fixed the collar without fixing it. He walked like he was carrying a board and didn't want to hit anyone with the end. My son met him halfway between the mic and the edge of the mat. They shook. They smiled at different moments. The envelope changed hands as if it knew where to go. Principal Davis stepped in and made short work of what could have ballooned. "Thank you," she said. "These are monthly, as long as the fund holds and the work does too. If you didn't hear your name today, come ask me how to make it happen next month. Hint involves showing up, using your hands, and being a good kind of tired." A custodian rolled in a cart of milk crates filled with library books that needed to go back to real shelves. The gym took that as its cue to breathe again. Applause folded into chatter. The oranges did what oranges do, disappeared. Teachers began the art of hurting. My son stepped off the stage into a new problem. People moved toward him, not a crowd. A stream. Children who shake hands too fast. A teacher with a clipboard and a question. And then a woman I recognized from the grocery aisle, only today her hair was pulled back and her coat had the kind of clean only Thursdays manage. She didn't make a scene. She did the opposite. She leaned in and said something no microphone could hear. "Thank you," just that. The kind that has no exclamation point because it doesn't need one. I watched his face try to file the sentence. Embarrassment arrived first, the body's way of saying this feels like a mirror. He looked down, then up, then nowhere. He said, "You're welcome," and meant it poorly because meaning it well takes practice. The woman smiled the way people do when they have decided not to make it any harder, then backed into the crowd and let the day keep going. He stood there a second with the envelope copies under his arm and his hands uncertain. Then a kid tugged his jacket and asked if the checks were real, and he grinned. "Real enough to buy a hammer," he said, and the kid took that as a yes, that would work. I stayed where I was. Men who used to coach know you don't run onto a court after a buzzer unless someone is on the floor. He wasn't. He was standing, awkward, red intact. I took a breath and let it go and felt the rib cage do its job without advice from me. On my way out, Principal Davis caught me by a door marked Exenty in letters that never get tired of their job. She lifted the empty orange bowl, tilted it so I could see there were only peels and 2 quarters at the bottom. "Patience paid," she said, and laughed at her own joke the way good principals do when they want you to remember it. "Thank you," I said. "No," she said. "Thank Rose." She tapped the program peeking from my pocket, and thanked the man whose name is under presenter. That cost him more than the check. Outside, air knifed along the gaps in my coat. Parents zipped kids, buses coughed awake. The cardinal on the roofline hopped twice, then turned its red shoulder to the wind. I stood on the sidewalk longer than a sidewalk invites and watched a door open and close and open again. My son came out alone, coat unbuttoned. He scanned the lot the way a boy does when he hopes a hand will lift above a crowd and show him which car. He didn't see me. I didn't help him. He tucked the program into his jacket like a receipt you keep, then took it out again and smoothed it with his thumbs. He shook his head at himself and smiled, a small private thing he forgot to hide, then put the paper back carefully and walked toward the maple tree that looks like all trees when it's cold. I turned toward my truck. Darnell receipt 2 verified. Fees waived. Month 1 complete. The screen lit my hand in winter light. I slid the phone away. I drove past the house where the wreath still leaned like it was waiting for a better angle. The porch light was off. Day had enough light of its own. I kept going, letting the heater climb slowly a degree at a time. Warmth works best that way, earned, not blasted. Pride and duty argued in their kitchen the way weather argues with windows. One loud, one constant. Pride liked volume. Duty liked lists. I didn't hear it through the wall. I saw it the way you see yesterday's storm by the sticks it leaves in the yard. The HOA fine posted and then was paid. A brochure for apartments downtown appeared in the recycling, torn in half. Greenfield logged a call and a promise for month 2. The insurance agent emailed a binder with my entity in the mortgagee clause and a signature that looked like someone pressed hard enough to break the pen. "She wants to move," Darnell said in the careful voice of a man who never has to meet the people on the other end of his notes. "He wants to not." He let the ellipses do the gossip. Move can mean flee. It can also mean grow. I waited. The broker sent them one more hope disguised as math. 12 months interest, only with a balloon so large you could see your panic in it. She printed it and set it on the dining room table next to a pile of folded boxes. Later, the boxes were gone, and the paper had a coffee ring through the word independent. You can tell what a house is thinking by where the coffee lands. He presented scholarships on Thursday, and came home a different temperature. He put the program on the counter and turned it twice as if the corners might tell him what to do. She touched it with 2 fingers like it might smear. "They made you the face of our debt," she said. "They made me say Grandma," he answered, and didn't apologize for the way his voice did when he said it. Friday night. A neighbor's porch light clicked on and off while they loaded a car with 3 sacks of clothes, and then unloaded it again. That is the choreography of marriages when the subject is money, but the topic is humiliation. The car becomes a suitcase that can't decide. She said the word rent like a life raft. He said the word obligation like a dock. Both are wood. Only one holds still. By Saturday afternoon, the House had cast its vote. The CHOA fee was cleared. The binder had landed. The district office posted the second scholarship receipt with more confidence than the first. My phone chimed. Month 2 planned scholarship path, binder verified. Darnell added as if by reflex, "Nice work." He meant theirs. I let him. The knock came after dark, 2 short, 1 long, the rhythm of hesitation deciding to behave like resolve. I opened my door and found my son on the mat with a grocery sack balanced on his forearm. The cold had painted his ears the color of good intentions. I didn't know which kind, he said, holding the bag up as if it needed a witness. So I bought both. Navels and the pink ones that look like sunrise when you cut them. Caracara, I said. Yeah, he said. Relieved the world has names for things you want to make right. He didn't step in. I didn't pull him. We stood with the threshold between us like a polite third party. "I'm sorry," he said, and I could smell it, citrus and winter wool. "For the locks, for making you buy my lesson, for using words like independent the way kids use swords made of plastic. I let the apology sit the way you set a board on sawhorses and check if it's straight before you nail anything. Then I said, are you here as my borrower or my son?" He thought about it as if the wrong answer might knock a picture off a wall. "Both," he said. "I think that's the only way I know how to tell the truth right now." "Good," I said. "Borrowers bring paperwork. Sons bring fruit." He laughed, surprising himself. He tilted the bag to look inside like he'd forgotten what he picked. The oranges knocked against each other softly. We moved into the kitchen without ceremony. I found the old knife with the good edge, the one your hand knows before your eyes do. He laid the bag down like he was setting a baby on a church pew. I cut a navel and the room filled with a smell so specific you could aim a memory at it. "Grandma used to quarter them," he said, watching my hands. "She said it was juice for patience. She was right about almost everything that matters and wrong about clocks," I said. "She always thought she was late." He leaned on the counter and didn't rush. "I don't want to move," he said. "She does. I don't blame her for wanting a door that doesn't feel like an argument. But I keep thinking about those kids. The boy who asked if the check was real. It felt bad to like that. Is that messed up? It's human," I said, liking that your name doesn't shiver when people say it. "That's not vanity. That's hearing your life land." He nodded, then the nod failed halfway and became a shrug. "I can't refinance," he said, pulling the bandage clean. "Not yet. They want 3 on time. They want insured. They want calm. I have one of those. I'm working on the second. The third is going to be new for me." He smiled like a man admitting he has never met a wild animal and wants to learn its name. "Calm is a muscle," I said. "It gets stronger when you put it under boring weight." He stared at the quarters of orange on the cutting board. "I'll do month 2, he said. "Scholarship path, and the hours. I signed up for the Saturday build. Habitat. They said bring gloves. I have gloves. I'm going to show up before they tell me where to park." I didn't cheer. He's not a boy who needs cheer. He's a man who needs someone to nod like a level at center. I nodded. "And the insurance?" I asked. "Binder sent," he said. She said the affidavit made her feel accused. I said the frozen pipe will feel worse. He winced and added, "I'm learning how to say sentences like that without sounding like you." "You'll fail," I said. "But you'll get the work done." We ate in the quiet kitchen's elbows braced, juice sticky at the corners of our mouths like we were both 10. Apologies have textures. This one was pulp. He wiped his hands on a paper towel and then on his jeans, then gave up and let his hands be what they were. "Dad," he said. I looked up. "I can't promise I won't get mad at you again," he said. "I probably will. But I wanted to be the one to start over. Me, not you leaving something under a mat." He lifted the bag, still half full. "This is me knocking." "I hear you," I said. He fished in his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The program from the assembly, creased new. He smoothed it and set it by the knife. I keep thinking about saying grandma into a microphone, he said. It felt like I was borrowing a coat that finally fit. He laughed, embarrassed. That sentence made sense in my head. It makes sense out loud, I said. Keep that coat. Winter's not done. He tapped the program with 2 fingers. She wants to go to her sister's for a while, he said, meaning his wife. Clear her head. I might let her. I might let the house be quiet enough to hear itself. Does that sound like quitting? It sounds like sweeping before you paint, I said. Some jobs want silence. He nodded, grateful to put his marriage in the same sentence with brooms. He reached for another orange, and then didn't. He looked at the door like it might have advice. Doors rarely do. They like to be opened or closed, not consulted. I should go, he said. If I stay, I'll start fixing things, and you'll make me prove I turned the breaker off. I would, I said. At the threshold, he held up the bag, now lighter. I'll bring the receipts, he said. Not to make you proud, to make me not hate myself. He winced, then half smiled. Also to make Greenfield's tiles turn green. I like green, I said. Keeps pipes from bursting. He stepped onto the porch, cold grabbing his coat by the lapels. He turned back with the look boys wear when they're trying not to be boys anymore. Thanks, he said, and added too quickly, for the knife work. Anytime, I said. Knives and ledgers. That's what we've got. He went down the steps and across the small square of dark, like a man who had decided to carry something with 2 hands. The night took him, then gave him back in the shape of taillights turning at the end of the block. Inside, the kitchen held the smell of fruit and a sound that wasn't quite silence. More the hush a room makes when a window has been closed against weather. I washed the knife and dried it with a towel that had seen better days and better oranges. The cutting board wore the small crescent moons of a night when words did their work without raising their voices. I left the quarters on a plate for breakfast. Apology keeps till morning if you don't put it in the wrong drawer. We met at Ms. Kim's office with paper that already knew our names. She put the old side letter on the table like a beam ready for sistering. Amend, she said, and underlined the word once. Darnell dialed in from Greenfield, voice steady in a speaker the size of a coaster. We're adding work, I said. Not drama. Community hours have been capped at 8. Make it 12. Same 25 investor directed curtailment per hour when verified. Add language that hours aren't charity. They're part of performance. Ms. Kim wrote it tighter than I said it. Community credit expanded to 12 her SMO. Curtailment remains 25 her hours must be with approved partners. Documentation required. Failure to deliver hours does not default plan but cancels credit. She slid the draft to me. Pencil ticked the margin where a comma should live. Darnell said, we can code a higher cap. Investors rarely ask for more work. Consider me pleasantly confused. My son signed. This time his signature didn't rush. You can tell when a hand has practiced keeping promises. The roof at Maple Elementary had a little lift where wind likes to start fights. Habitat needed bodies for a Saturday fixed tar paper, new tabs, the safe kind of slope. He showed up early wearing the gloves he'd bragged about and a nervous grin that fit his face like a first suit. The site lead pointed at the pallets. Hull. Then hammer. It's good when instructions rhyme. He carried shingles like sentences he meant to finish. He learned the rhythm of a nail gun without making the roof sound like a bad drummer. Kids waved from the playground fence. Someone brought coffee that tasted like cardboard and heat. He drank it like permission. At lunch he sat on the ridge and looked over the parking lot. All those minivans. All that weekday waiting. He said to a man with a pencil behind his ear, my grandmother liked roofs. The man nodded. Grandmother's like anything that keeps kids dry. He sent me a photo I hadn't asked for. No face, just boots, a line of straight shingles, a square of sky. The kind of picture you take when you finally understand why levels exist. During the week, he started putting numbers where conversations used to sit. He made a budget the way you frame a wall studs at regular intervals, openings where openings belong, no wishful spans. He downloaded an app and hated it. He bought a composition notebook and it loved him back. Columns, dates, a place for receipts. He wrote month 3, due and under it, scholarship, escrow, hours like a list of lumber dropped in a driveway. He met with a counselor at the credit union because I told him banks will explain themselves if you let them. She drew a box around the line that read subscriptions and said, these are weeds. They don't look like weeds until they take the path. He canceled 3 and felt ridiculous and rich at the same time. He started carrying cash for groceries. The first time he handed over bills he counted with his thumb. He looked 12 and proud. I didn't stand next to him while he learned. Men learn better when the porch is empty but the light is on. I kept my part, answered Darnell's emails, watched the tiles turn green, wrote checks to a fund with a name that refuses to apologize for being kind. At the district office, Principal Davis kept the ledger like a person who knows exactly how far $20 can travel in a city bus. Month 2 posted. Month 3 posted. She sent me a tally with a line that tasted like good news, fund balance sufficient to add 2 new awards next month. She proposed names that didn't need to be clever to work. First, books in warm hands. The first for a reading list a teacher said out loud, the second for gloves that didn't make recess a test of pain. Darnell's portal did its noises. No late fee glowed where accrued used to sit. He wrote Binder confirmed HOA 0, month 3 P&I credited per receipts, 12 hers verified, curtailment applied. He added an emoji he pretends he doesn't know how to use. I pretended not to notice. On the last Saturday of the month, my son knocked again without staging the rhythm in his head first. He came in and sat at my table and flattened his notebook with a palm. Month 3, he said, and slid a school receipt across the wood. It had the same ugly font and honest ink. He lined up the Habitat sign in sheet beside it, proud as a kid with perfect attendance. I set the papers on the craft paper in the bottom drawer of my desk, the one where the copies live. Good work, I said. He exhaled in a way that had months in it. Then he didn't leave. He stared at the grain of the table. He traced a scar in the oak where a pan landed hard in 98. He said nothing until the silence started doing the most obvious thing it could do, make space. I have another debt, he said. He tried to say it like period, not confession. It didn't stick. Who? I asked. Not how much. Who? Names matter first. Numbers come obediently after. He swallowed. A card, I said. I didn't have any more. It's not huge. It's just loud. He glanced up like a kid checking a referee's face. And a pay lighter. Christmas. Stupid. He put his hand on the notebook as if it might jump. Balance. I said now, because we had earned the right to ask. He told me. It wasn't ruin. It was sand where concrete should be. It was a door hinge with one screw missing. The kind you can fix if you admit the squeak is a squeak. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hear you say the sentence, he said. What sentence? I asked, even though we both knew. I'm not going to save you, he said, and his mouth wobbled around the words like they were sour and necessary. I'm not, I said. I'm going to sit here while you learn how to. He nodded, a flinch converted into maturity. I figured, he said. I brought a list. He flipped the notebook to a page where the lines had been used like a grid. Snowball vis avalanche was written at the top. Pros, cons, due dates circled, APRs in the margin. He had called the card company and gotten a human to say a smaller number out loud. He had closed the Paylighter app like you close a window during a storm and then put tape over the latch. He had written cash envelopes, real with a box next to it he could check with a pen and a sigh. Pick avalanche, I said. You're a numbers man when you aren't pretending not to be. Highest rate first. Small wins are overrated when interest is patient. Okay, he said, relief showing like heat through a vent. I thought you'd say that. I wanted to make sure the voice in my head wasn't just you doing an impression of my conscience. I'm flattered by the casting, I said.
But your voice is fine.
He smiled and then didn't. She might leave, he said, meaning his wife. She says the house feels like a ledger and I feel like a lecture. Ledgers can be kind, I said. Lectures can't. Be a ledger. How? Write what happened. Don't explain it. Pay what you can. Don't announce it. Tell the truth in columns. People believe columns when they won't believe a man. He ran a hand through his hair and left it there, like he was checking his head for a stud. If she goes to her sister's, will you? I won't talk about her, I said. I'll talk about you. You're the only person I'm allowed to fix. He let that seat itself. He pulled an orange from his jacket pocket and rolled it toward me like a peace offering to a treaty already signed. You ever get tired of being right? He asked. I get tired of winter, I said. Being right is just a way to keep pipes from bursting. We quartered the orange in the old motion our hands remember without help. He ate his slice in 2 bites and wiped his fingers on a paper towel like a man who has learned to prefer clean to dramatic. On Monday, Ms. Kim filed the amendment with a signature that looked like a string pulled snug. Darnell coded the new cap. The district office added 2 lines to the program template for next month. First, books, warm hands. Principal Davis emailed that we'd need more chairs in the gym. The custodian replied with a thumbs up that somehow felt like a hymn. By Wednesday, my son's notebook had fewer blank spaces and more math. I didn't see it. He texted a picture, Because sometimes the thing you need is not a hand on your shoulder, but a person who knows the difference between a good eraser and a stall. He wrote card, drafted an app. Deleted in Saturday, library to hers. He added, calm is a muscle, in quotes, and didn't attribute it to me. Good it's his now. At the end of the week, he stood in his kitchen and called a voice that lives in a card company's building. He told them his plan and wrote down their promise in ink, not in hope. He paid the first avalanche chunk. Not big. Real. He didn't ask me to match it. He didn't hint. He didn't leave the number on the table like bait. He just said the receipt number out loud and put the phone down like a hammer that had done enough for the day. That night, the house across town breathed easier. You could tell by the way the porch light clicked on before the sun gave up. That's a house that believes people are coming back. In my drawer, the papers lay where paper likes to live, flat-dated, teachable. No late fee for month 3. Fund balance ready to lift 2 more kids. A side letter amended like a longer sleeve added to a winter coat. On top, the Habitat Hours sheet with his name in ink that didn't smear. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the doorway a second longer than a man needs to. The threshold under my feet had carried 1,000 comings and goings. It had learned that the heaviest weight is sometimes a person deciding not to ask for rescue and not to lie about wanting it. Outside, the cardinal on the fence post flicked its head, then stayed. Winter is still winter even when roofs don't leak. I pulled my coat close and locked the door behind me, not to keep anyone out, but because locks, like plans, work best when they're used on purpose. The storm came in sideways, the kind that teaches streets the shape of drifts. Weather advisories used words that sound like warnings but feel like scolding. Wind chill, whiteout, stay. At 9:15 my phone rang through the kind of quiet a house keeps when it knows it might be tested. Dad? He said. Not Sir Dad. The word warmed the line a degree. What's wrong? I said. Because when a man calls you dad in a storm, it's a valve, not a greeting. The kitchen tap is a thread, he said. The upstairs bath is coughing. The furnace is working too hard. He swallowed. Can you come? I can, I said. Do you want me to? A pause that wasn't pride this time, just a man measuring a doorway before he walks through. Yes, he said. Please. I pulled the old plastic crate from the hall closet, space heater, pipe wraps, a roll of heat tape that had seen 3 winters and still believed in work, 2 styrofoam spigot covers, zip ties, a headlamp because storms make men forget where they left flashlights. On top I set a grocery bag with 2 oranges. Habit packs itself. Driving across town, the plows threw their shoulders against the street and grumbled. The world went to 2 colors, white and the yellow of the truck light that says, I am trying. I parked where I always do and watched the porch light cut a cone in the snow. He was at the door before I reached the steps, coat thrown over pajamas, socks and boots without laces. He opened wide and let the warm out like a man who finally learned the cost of that mistake and made it anyway because he needed me to step through. We're first, I said. Basement, he said, and we went. Houses have a different voice in winter. The furnace talks more. The ductwork answers back. Pipes stay quiet if you show them you're paying attention. We opened the vanity doors under the sinks like you coax a shy animal from a corner. We set the faucets to a steady drip, not stingy, not wasteful, enough to keep water from choosing the shape of ice. I wrapped the run on the exterior wall with the heat tape and let it hum, low as a hymn. He held the light while I worked. He didn't talk much. When he did, it was with sentences that had learned not to get in the way. I forgot to open the cabinet last time it got cold. I thought dripping was an old wives' tale. I can hear the furnace when the wind turns. Useful confessions. The kind of house forgives. Upstairs the bathroom sounded like a tired smoker. We coaxed that line with a gentle tap and a stubborn stare. I showed him how to turn the stop a quarter back from wide, to give the valve a future. He nodded like a student paying the kind of attention teachers notice. In the kitchen, we slid the trash can out and let the warm crawl into the cabinet. He took the pipe wrap from me without being asked and finished the run behind the dishwasher that defeats grown men. He found pride in awkward spaces. Outside, we fitted the foam cover over the hose bib. His breath fogged and drifted. He tightened the little rubber band with the seriousness of a man tying a tie before work that matters. These stupid things, he said, not unkindly. They look like hats for a house. They are, I said. We forget houses have ears. They get cold first. Back inside, the furnace stopped sounding panicked and went back to doing its job. We stood in the kitchen and listened to the nobodies of a house that isn't in trouble. Fan drip. A hum you only notice when it isn't there. He rubbed his hands together and blew into them the way boys do when they're trying to convince the world they can handle it. "Thank you," he said. He said it like a payment that posted. I nodded, because sometimes nodding is the exact change. He looked toward the front door and then down at the floor in front of it. "I've been thinking about that night," he said. "We both knew which one. I keep hearing the click. Stupid, right? I've learned harder sounds since?" "It's not stupid," I said. "Houses keep their sounds. So do men." We stood there in our coats like we might leave at any second and knew we wouldn't. He reached into the counter drawer where the map used to be and pulled something small on a ring. He held it out with a face that had not decided whether to be proud or embarrassed. "A key. New brass, edges still square, on a cheap ring with a tag you could write on." The little card read nothing yet. He didn't make me read it out loud. He didn't make a speech. "I got it cut yesterday," he said. "I was going to leave it under the bird, and then I thought, no, I should hand it to you. Not to undo anything, just to." He searched and let the sentence finish itself in the air. "If you want it." I took it. It was heavier than it looked. Probably because I knew better now what it wasn't. Not forgiveness.
Not erasure. A copy. Insurance for the kind that matters.
Thank you,
I said, and my voice surprised me with how ready it was to be soft. "Do you want me to have it because I'm your lender or because I'm your father?" "Because winter is stupid," he said, and laughed, and then, quieter, "because I trust you." We were both suddenly all elbows. The laugh carried us to the door without consulting our brains. Under the porch light that once watched me fail a lock, we did the most ordinary hard thing two men can do. We hugged. It was an awkward hug, the kind you'd expect from a man who learned affection later, and a father who keeps his hands busy to avoid saying what hands can't. Coats made a swish. The porch light hummed. A drift leaned against the railing like a guest who refuses to be entertained. He didn't let go right away. Neither did I. When we did, we both made the same joke at the same time about the other smelling like the basement. And that broke whatever was still trying to pretend this was a movie. "I put the program in a frame," he said, not looking at me. "Grandma, my name under it. I put it in the hallway. She thinks it's tacky. Sentiment's a kind of insulation," I said. "It doesn't look like it works until you notice you aren't cold." He nodded. "She's at her sister's," he added, like a line the day demanded. "For a bit. She'll come back when it stops feeling like we're living inside a spreadsheet." "Make the spreadsheet feed the house," I said. "It'll forgive you both." He shrugged. "I'm trying. I signed up for another Saturday. Library shelves. Do they count as roofs?" "Only if they don't fall," I said. "They count." He looked at the key again. "You'll keep it. Not under a bird. Not in a book. On a hook, like a normal person." "I'll keep it," I said. "On a hook. Like a person who has learned that copies are not about trespass. They're about backup." He smiled for real then, the kind you can't stage. "I'm going to put a bowl of oranges by the door," he said. "Stupid, but it feels right." "It's not stupid," I said. "It's a way to remind your hands they're supposed to be useful." We stood on the porch a second longer than a porch wants in February. Wind pushed snow across the steps in little rivers. A neighbor's light came on, then off, a nod without a word. He tucked his chin into his collar the way men do when they're not done admitting things. "Sometimes I think I liked being angry at you," he said. "I made my choices make sense." "Anger's cheap heat," I said. "Warms you fast. Coasts you later." He put his hand on the doorframe, just placed it there, as if checking a stud, and then let it fall. "Thanks for coming," he said, and used Dad again, not Sir, as if trying it on a second time to be sure. "Thanks." "Dad, you're welcome," I said. "Cal me before pipes do." He laughed like a man who finally gets the joke that keeps a house alive. Inside, the furnace took a break. The fan sighed. The kitchen cabinet doors stayed open a while longer than necessary, the way people do after they've been braced for bad news and realize the room has decided to be kind. I stepped down into the snow and felt it give. He watched me cross to the truck and didn't close the door until I turned the key and waved. When he did, the latch found its home with the soft, dignified click of a thing doing its job. At the curb, I looked at the new brass in my palm, then slid it onto my ring. It didn't fight for attention. It settled between the ones that already knew their places. Back home, I hung it where keys hang, not on a shrine, on a hook. A spare. A promise that if this winter forgets itself again, two men know how to remember. The storm kept shouldering the night. Houses kept breathing. Somewhere in a gym, chairs waited to be stacked. On a school office desk, a ledger showed enough to add first books and warm hands next month. In a drawer in my desk, the copies of paper that matter lay flat and quiet. Above them, in the kitchen, a bowl with 2 oranges glowed like small suns, asking for nothing but hands. We met in Ms. Kim's conference room, the one with the window that looks at a brick wall and still finds light. She had stacked the documents in an order that made sense to paper. Deed into land trust, trust agreement, memorandum of covenant. The quiet kind that tells a clerk the story without shouting it on the courthouse steps. I'm not moving a house like a chess piece. I told my son before we signed anything. I'm putting it where it teaches best. He nodded, jacket still on, palms flat on the table like a man listening with his hands. Ms. Kim tapped the first page. A land trust, she said. Park's title with a trustee so that the beneficial interest can point where it ought to go. Today you live here, you pay here, you keep the roof honest. Later, the beneficiary changes when it should. Later meaning when you die, he said, and didn't try to make the sentence pretty. Or, I said, if we forget what we promised to remember? He looked at me. He knew the night I meant without either of us saying it. Miss Kim slid the trust diagram across. Little boxes with arrows that mean custody, not control. Trustee, she said, tapping her own typed name.
Beneficiaries for life, you.
Remainder. The Rose Scholarship Fund through the district's foundation. She tapped the memorandum. And this, recorded, gives the world notice of a separate agreement between you two. No dollar signs. Just terms you chose to live by, he read. He didn't rush. I could see his eyes slow on the line that mattered most, because mine had stopped there when I wrote it. Covenant of gratitude. If the borrower, after the forbearance period, Zive allows hazard insurance to lapse without immediate cure, a B allows delinquency beyond 60 days without contact, or C bars family from safe access in emergency. Then borrower agrees to convey his beneficial interest to the Rose Scholarship Trust within 30 days of notice. It's dramatic, he said, throat working. Feels like I'm signing a promise not to be the worst version of myself. You are, I said. So am I. Paper keeps us honest when memory gets tired. He kept reading. Page 2 turned the hard parts into ordinary trustee duties, taxes, no borrowing against the trust without a vote, no selling without replacing the shelter with shelter. A clause that said the house could host the work it had started, Saturday cruise in the driveway, a stack of hammers in the garage, a bowl of oranges by the door expected to go empty. What if? He stopped, started again carefully. What if we have a kid someday and the math gets stupid again? What if generosity turns into a reason to be sloppy? Then we yank generosity back into the lane, I said. The fund gets its due after the house is fed. This paper isn't a hero. It's a handrail. He breathed out through his nose and smiled small. I like handrails, he said. They make stairs honest. Kim uncapped her pen and set it at north on the compass of the first signature line. Trustee, she said, and signed. Settler, she said, and I signed. Occupancy beneficiary, she said to my son, and he put his name down in a hand that had learned to hold a nail straight before it swung. We signed the memorandum last. He ran his finger under the 3 triggers, like a man reading a spell he intends to obey instead of break. 60 days, he said quietly. No more pretending emergencies or personality traits. 60, I said, and phone calls. Ice breaks pipes. Silence breaks trust. He slid the paper back to Miss Kim. She stamped her small blue notary on the corner. This part, she said, tapping the memorandum, lives public as notice. The ethics of it live in private, where they do their best work. She looked at my son. If you're going to keep a promise, keep it where you can hear it. We walked out into a late afternoon that had remembered how to be light. Snow was still stacked where plows had performed their art. He put his hands in his pockets and pulled them out again, a man debating whether to say the next thing. Dad, he said, finding the word without apology. I want to change the scholarship amount. We already send the mortgage piece, I said. It's working. I know, he said. That's the bit that bought me a mirror. I'm saying add to it. 10% on top of whatever we're required to send, even after the forbearance is over. Even when we go back to normal P&I. Call it not penance, habit, 10%, I said, not sure if I was testing him or if he was testing himself. He nodded, and it wasn't the nod of a man offering theater, a tithe for the thing that kept a roof over our marriage when it wanted to blow off. If we can't do 10 in a month, we do 5 and call Ms. Davis and stack chairs, he smiled. Grandma would like both versions. He waited for me to add adult wisdom. I didn't. He'd brought his own. Write it, I said. We'll staple it to the inside of the trust where only you and I know it lives. Not a clause. A choice. We stood by my truck. He looked at the framed glass of the trust packet in my hands like a man looking at a map he intends to follow. "House isn't a trophy," he said softly, repeating the sentence I'd tried to make true from the beginning. "It's a school. Graduations happen every month," I said. "Bring your own cap and gown." He laughed, then shook his head at the picture and at himself for laughing at it. "I'll call Greenfield about the normal plan next week," he said. "We can move off the forbearance, keep the scholarship going anyway. I want the ledger to look like we meant it, not like we got pushed into being good." "You're allowed to be pushed," I said. "You're not allowed to pretend you were dancing." He stuck out his hand, then realized hands are wrong for moments that built a room, and reached for the other thing instead. He hugged me once quick, the way men do when the paperwork is the ceremony and the feeling is the reception. "Tell Ms. Davis about first books," he said into my coat. "Make it 3 next month if the balance allows." "It will," I said. "Work does." He stepped back, cheeks raw with cold and something else. "If I break it," he said, eyes on the trust packet, "if I even think about breaking it." "You bring the key and the oranges," I said. "We'll read the clause out loud and fix the pipe before it bursts." He nodded, a long, careful nod that made room for failure, and still chose the stairs. At home I slid the trust into the bottom drawer with the copies that hold the house together when stories try to run. On top I placed a sheet he had written in his own hand. "Standing gift 10% of monthly P&I to Grandma Rose scholarship, regardless of plan status. If not feasible, substitute hours. If pride objects, ignore pride." I didn't frame it. I didn't hang it on a wall. I left it where paper lives, flat, close, quiet, so that when we opened the drawer, the words would lift and do the small, sturdy work they were made to do. Outside, the cardinal stayed a little longer on the fence post, red against a sky that was thinking about spring. The house exhaled the way houses do when somebody inside has learned to mean a signature. And in a file at the district office, a balance ticked up enough to make room for another name, another envelope, another pair of hands that would leave an assembly and go stack chairs, because in this kind of arithmetic, that's how you say thank you. A year later, the wreath hung straighter. Snow worked the edges of the walk but didn't win. I climbed the steps with a pie I didn't pretend to have baked. Before my finger found the bell, the door opened. "Dad," he said, already smiling. He had the look of a man who'd learned how to let heat stay inside when he welcomed someone. Behind him the house breathed even, like a furnace that finally trusts its own pilot. The table held more food than a family knows what to do with. In the center, a white bowl of oranges. On the sill, the red ceramic cardinal watched the room as if it had never left its post. Someone had taped a paper sign to a small clear box by the lamp. "Grandma Rose Scholarship, December." The box held envelopes, crumpled bills, a few coins. It looked like work, not magic. People ate. People told the same stories they always tell louder each year. A kid in socks skated across the hardwood, wiped out, laughed, learned. I stood at the counter, peeled an orange, let the smell say the things people ruin when they say them. When the plates were a mess and the noise was soft, I reached into my pocket. The new brass key had spent a year on my ring and never once asked to be brave. I set it on the table between us. "I don't need this to come in anymore," I said. He looked down at the key like it had walked there. He nodded once. It wasn't dramatic. It was true. He picked it up. For a second, I thought he'd press it back into my palm, the way I had once pressed one into his. He didn't. He turned, lifted the lid on the scholarship box, and dropped the key inside. It clicked against the acrylic the way good vows do, small, final, cheerful. The room didn't go quiet. It didn't need to. The sound had already done its job. "Let it stay where it's been working," he said. "We'll keep doors with what we give." Someone called for a photo. He winced and went anyway. He stood under the doorway with the people who had come to learn how to linger. The cardinal watched. The bowl of oranges glowed like little suns. The door stood open long enough to prove we could afford it, then closed on purpose. Later, when the house had the slow hum of dishes and low voices, he pressed a folded check into the box and slid an envelope on top with my name on it. Inside, a printed receipt from the district, first books in warm hands, circled in pen. Under it, his handwriting will make room for another next month. I put my hand on his shoulder. He didn't shrug it off. That was the whole miracle. A small one, steady enough to live here. Out in the night, the cold tested the windows and learned why they were built. I walked to my truck without hurrying. I breathed white and felt warm where it matters. Respect and gratitude don't borrow well. They are paid, quietly, monthly, and then handed forward so someone else can come in out of the weather. At the curb, I looked back. The porch light made its cone on the snow. The door opened again, on time, on purpose, and stayed that way a second longer than needed. Long enough to say what doors say when people learn their price. Come in. A note of thanks, an invitation to share. Thank you for reading The Price of Warmth to the end. If this story touched you even a little, please share it with someone who might need to open a door with someone in their life. A single share, a short comment, or a simple orange helps keep me going with more Dad's last revenge chapters. You can share this story with a friend, a father, or a son you're thinking of. Comment with the moment that warmed you most. Follow the channel to get the next part as soon as it's posted. Thanks for staying to the end. See you in the next story.